Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another Grounded TV live stream. We're going to be getting into the headline for today, which is rumors swirling about that there from a leaked memo from the NDP party that there will be an election coming March 10th, as soon as this Liberal leadership race is dealt with, due to how high the Liberals are doing in the polls. And I never really thought about it. With the polls being the way they are, this makes them want to go to an election way quicker. You know what I mean? And I think it's reckless, personally. I think it's reckless. But we'll see what happens. Like, for them, if they have their own interests at best, I feel like they're going to lose. At best, they're going to be able to, just get in Poilievre's way when he's prime minister. I definitely think Poilievre will be the next prime minister of Canada, just based off how things have been going up to this point. I don't think anyone can really take that away from him. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Anyways, we'll get right into the main headline here, guys.
Welcome back.
So this is CTV's power play from last night around dinner time, PST.
In Ottawa, we're always ready for a federal election campaign, but the NDP have a good hunch that one could start in less than a month. In a letter to NDP candidates and campaign teams that was obtained by CTV News, National Campaign Director Jennifer Howard writes, in part, Donald Trump's continued threats to our sovereignty and to Canadian workers need a strong, united, and immediate response. Nonetheless, Parliament stands prorogued, and no Liberal leadership candidate, including Mr. Carney, has reached out to any opposition leaders to discuss emergency legislation coming to Parliament to deal with Donald Trump's trade war and the impact on Canadians. She continues, we believe the rumors of Mr. Carney calling a snap election are credible. Adding, the Liberals believe that they can turn this crisis into a political benefit for them. I'm asking all campaigns to be prepared for an election call.
I never thought about that. And that that's just it. Can't let a good crisis go to waste, right, guys? Geez, that, I don't know why I didn't see this coming. And it makes a lot of sense now, seeing it put in front of me like this. And honestly, just to hear we're actually going to have an election coming very soon. Who knows? They might change their tune if they start dipping in the polls again. But hope everyone's enjoying their Friday so far. Just me for now. Saul will be joining when he can, probably in within an hour, I assume.
To come as early as March 10th. Here's Mark Carney's response.
Yeah, Liberal leadership hasn't even been declared yet, so we also got to remember that we don't even know for sure if Mark Carney's going to win. It just seems like he's being appointed almost.
You never take a decision before you need to take a decision. And so nothing is pre-wired. Let's see what the situation is in the...
Yeah, Great Dominion, I saw those polls as well. That's what I'm saying. If they start to continue to dip again in the polls, who knows, they might back out of this. But at this point, I think with the way the polls are, it makes sense for them to want to do this, not to mention capitalize on the whole trade war and try and utilize that, right? If they cling on to power and postpone an election, at least Mark Carney's smart enough to figure out that's not going to go well for them. So I'm glad to hear that at least they have some common sense to understand that an election is needed ASAP. ASAP. It's basically a referendum on how we're going to deal with the whole trade war.
The middle of March, and do what is best for Canadians, and the government will do what's best for Canadians. If Parliament needs to be recalled for certain reasons, it will be. If it makes sense to get a strong mandate at that point, that is what will follow.
Oh, I strongly believe they'll be quoting his book at him a lot on certain phrases and stuff. By the way, Luca, I'm still waiting on the full quotes, where he says he hates the West.
So just how likely is a snap call? Let's bring back our front bench. Michelle Cardario, Gary Marr, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Michelle, I'm going to start with you. Let's just point out, that's not a no from Mark Carney.
Well, of course not. First of all, he's got the small, thing of just winning the leadership race too. So it would be unbelievably arrogant to get it too ahead of himself. And also it would be kind of dumb to actually, cut off one of your options, before you've even got the job or actually been sworn in. So, and I think there's so much uncertainty. We don't know what Mr. Trump is going to do. It's quite something that the NDP are upset that they haven't gotten a call about bringing forward legislation, as I think that they actually want to bring the Liberals down anyways and go into an election at first opportunity is the last that I heard from that leader. So one would think that they're already getting, some kind of election footing if their intention was to do so at the end of March. And in most seriousness, we don't know what Mr. Trump's bringing in. So we don't know what the legislation would be for response. And until we do know, then, the government can't prepare it and bring the House back. So, I think that all parties, quite rightly, are probably getting on election footing. All parties have seen, except for the Liberals, have been calling for an election for a number of months now, and the Conservatives for even longer.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Is like, were we really on our way to an election? Because Jagmeet Singh has just flipped and flopped, and he's flopping and flipping again. And now we're hearing, like, I don't believe that Jagmeet Singh is going to call an election, like, ever. Like, I feel like it will have to be the Liberals calling the election. Like, I don't think Jagmeet Singh even has it in him to call an election. Like, I don't think it's possible. Like, I was watching old footage of him from September when he ripped up the agreement 5 months ago. 5.5 months ago, this Jagmeet Singh ripped up that agreement, and nothing has changed.
Longer than that. Narrowing polls, right circumstance, in ordinary times without Mr. Trump as a trigger. Yeah, I think that going early would be very much on the table. So there's going to be a lot to talk about over the next month and a half anyways.
Yeah, and Tom, it's interesting because we did talk about some of those polls earlier this week that do show, the Leger poll particularly, showing that if Carney is the leader of the Liberals, that he's at a dead heat with Pierre Poilievre. But I wonder whether or not you think, like this is something that, of course, CTV News obtained, but these types of memos don't get out by mistake. Do you think Jennifer is being...
Yeah, like this is a tactic. This is their way of letting the public know what's going on. Because I guess they're trying to take some heat off it. Because the NDP dipping in the polls right now. So
Jennifer Howard is being prudent here, or do you think that she, really is onto something?
Well, first of all, from all the people who've worked with her since I left, nobody has anything but good things to say about Jennifer Howard. She's top notch. She was a former minister in Manitoba. She's she's at the top of her game, and she's in the right place. I can share with you that on the French media, I do a lot of French television, radio, and write in one of the major French paper. People are taking the 14th, 15th of March as pretty well the date when this thing's going to be called, and everybody is assuming that Mark Carney is going to win this thing. So is that going to come to pass?
Yeah, and like Great Dominion was pointing out that everyone thought Peter MacKay had the CPC leadership in the bag as well. So we'll see what happens, right? Like Mark Carney hasn't won this race yet, and from what I understand, there still will be an obstacle where he will have to be an elected member of parliament before he can assume title as prime minister. So he's going to have to basically, I guess, yeah, like from what I understand, like I don't think he can be an interim prime minister if he's unelected. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I'm very conscious that Michelle was absolutely spot on. You've got to be very careful as you answer that question, not to give the impression that you think that this thing is already decided. But we can assume that it's almost decided. And I think that that Carney was careful, because the way things have been going, it might be necessary to have a mandate from Parliament. But one of the reasons why they want to go early is that Mark Carney's not in Parliament. He doesn't have a seat. And so there's the big issue of the mandate, which is the thing that he talked about. There are a lot of other things, that
I was just talking about, actually. For once, I agree with Tom Mulcair a little bit here.
Move you towards the conclusion that the Liberals want to go as quickly as possible. And, one of them is as prosaic as the fact that to get the House back in, you need a throne speech. And if you really want to get 8 million Canadians who have French as their first language angry, put in a Governor General who a few years in, still can't deliver a speech in French. And I know it sounds like, irrelevant to a whole bunch of people, but it's the type of thing, Carney and the Liberals have been tailoring their messages. They've been doing very well. He is super well liked in Quebec. But all of a sudden, Mary Simon would have a role in that election that I don't think anybody wants. And so I think that there's a whole bunch of big and small reasons why the Liberals are just going to want to go as soon as possible. The big decision for them is short campaign or long campaign. I remember Harper decided a long campaign was in his favor against Justin Trudeau in 2015. He was
Yeah, what is this super confidence in Carney? Honestly, I think it's the Conservatives ramping him up for a while have shown people they're worried about him, right? Or that they're concerned of him, or, why have they been talking about carbon tax Carney for over a year now? They've been branding him, right? Like clearly for whatever reason, he is their biggest threat. And that's how they see it. And I feel like that's why everyone wants to rally behind him. I think that's part of it, is that anyone who doesn't like the Conservatives, they're going to vote for Mark Carney now because they just want Carney to win. Like, I feel like a lot of NDP voters are ditching the NDP to vote Liberal because they don't want Poilievre to win. Like, I know someone in that situation where they would vote for Mark Carney in the next election because they just don't want Poilievre to win. And they think that Mark Carney has the best chance. Mark Carney's not even Liberal leader yet. And they're already planning on voting for him as prime minister, for prime minister, right? Like, it's like in the next election for another term, no, let alone, within their own Liberal Party elections, in their leadership elections. So it's just crazy.
Was dead wrong. His assumption was the more Canadians saw of Trudeau, the more they would find him inadequate. Turned out that he was okay. He gets through the first couple of debates and people start saying, he's not as bad as you said he was. So it worked out in Trudeau's favor. Is it going to be the same thing with Poilievre, or do you give Poilievre a bit more time? Because I do know him. I spent 10 years across from him in Parliament. He's a very irascible character who can say very unpredictable things. And so that's going to be the big debate.
All right, Tom. It's just so funny. The more I hear Tom Mulcair talk, the more I just feel like he's a little snooty. You know what I mean? For NDP, he's a little snooty.
Amongst the Liberals, I think. But I think the rest of it is pretty well. As for the date that it's called, I think we're looking mid-March, pretty safe, before St. Paddy's Day.
Like, I feel like he's the type of guy who would try and quote, like, famous scientists in, like, poems just to sound smart. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I'll write that one down and hold you to it, frankly. But Gary, do you think that also maybe Mark Carney's looking at this as maybe the leadership bump that could carry him through it and carry that into a campaign?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, I was actually thinking about back in, when Kim Campbell was first elected leader of the Progressive Conservative Party. My recollection is that around the time of July, the Canada Day weekend, she was actually much more popular than Jean Chrétien. But as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And of course, we know that the Conservatives went down to ending up with just 2 seats, Jean Charest and Elsie Wayne. So I think if it is indeed Mr. Carney that becomes the leader of the party, I think it would probably be in his best interest to take advantage of the recency effect and the warmth and the attention that he's gotten during the leadership and try and convert that into electoral success. I think Mr. Poilievre we've seen him already shift from his Trudeau Singh cabal to now talking about Mr. Carney being really the consummate insider with the current government.
And this is what I'm saying, right? Is like Poilievre kind of, I don't know if he did himself any favors. Maybe like, do you guys think that Poilievre did himself more favors by branding Carney before he was really in the spotlight? Or do you think he didn't do much favors and just dragged Carney into the spotlight ahead of time? I'm just curious. Because, like, to me, like, I feel like, he was trying to brand him as carbon tax Carney for sure. And pointing out he was advising the Liberals, all that stuff, pointing out, like, in those committee meetings forever ago, like, he was shining spotlights on Mark Carney. Like, I just never understood why this guy, like, he was so worried about this guy, right? And for whatever reason, maybe it is because Quebec support's a big deal for a Liberal. Like, right now, with the amount of support the Bloc has, like, that can be taken away if people in Quebec want to vote for somebody else. So that's a huge, huge thing to get the Quebec vote, in my opinion, for a potential prime minister. And not to mention, Quebec's the second most populated province in the country.
Of Canada, the Liberal Party, and we'll see if that lasts. But I think the longer that you give Mr. Poilievre the opportunity to make that connection, the harder it will be for you as the leader of the Liberal Party to succeed in a general election.
Yeah, Robin, it's interesting because you add to that the fact that in the most populous province, they will have just come out of an election here in Ontario, and that's a strain on volunteers and campaign resources as well.
Yeah, and it's been cold and snowy in Ontario, and that's not much fun to try for candidates or volunteers or voters.
2 Cents thinks it was a good strategy to pre-inform Canadians as to Carney's dismal background. Okay, so Robin agrees with you as well, from two of our members there. The cons aren't scared of him. Target your lead rival. It's not a new tactic. Well, that's what I mean, right? Is like, obviously they are scared of him and they are worried about him as their number one adversary. So that's how I take it anyways.
To go out in the snow. Do they want to go out in March?
Yeah, Great Dominion saying he's been talking about it for 2 years now at least. And that's what I've been saying. It's like, it's been a while he's been talking about this. Like, since not long after those committee meetings in 2021, he's been talking about this.
But I think Tom's onto something. Beware the Ides of March. The only thing is, Mark Carney is a central bank governor. So he is, by nature, risk averse in the sense that he is a very canny, careful, cautious man. But if the getting looks as good as it's going to get, then you'd be smart to maybe pounce. I mean,
yeah, and that's what I didn't think about with, you know, people can think, oh no, Pierre's slipping in the polls. But even if like there was an election tomorrow, like Pierre's still going to be prime minister by these polls. If these polls were an exact representation, if that's what you want. But it looks like the Liberals and the NDP together could really get in the way of the Conservatives. So I just don't think Poilievre, like our worst case scenario is Poilievre doesn't have this sweeping majority, right? Yeah, I don't know, dude. Like, I just think it's not, like, I don't understand why we can't say somebody's scared. Clearly, they're worried about him.
Mike, you and I talked about this on the radio earlier today. You know, here you have the situation where...
Oh, Luca's got the quote from Mark Carney's book. All right. Western society is morally rotten, and it has been corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about climate emergency that threatens life on Earth. All right. I will search that excerpt in the book as well and read that whole chapter to get the full context. But there you go. Luca, you gave me the full quote. Thank you. There we go, guys. There's the full quote from Mark Carney's book supporting the theory that Mark Carney hates the West.
Where the just inflation gone because Justin Trudeau is gone. The carbon tax, it's effectively gone with whoever wins the Liberal leadership. Apparently, you have Canada is broken. That narrative just can't sell anymore. You can't. The flag waving is not now convoy protesters with F Trudeau signs. The flag waving is now people worried about Donald Trump and a 51st state push from here in Washington. So I think if you're Mark Carney and
yeah, Luke, I feel like I've read that already, that part of the book, because he talks about that and stuff. And I was mentioning that where he talks about corporations need consciences and stuff like that. But that quote doesn't necessarily tell me he hates the West. The one you said right there, that Western society is morally rotten, I think that's the best quote to support your theory there.
That Leger poll is very, very telling, and Leger is one of the best pollsters in the country. Yeah. And if they're saying that he's strongest against Trump, according to voters, if voters feel he's stronger against Trump than Poilievre, and I think, frankly, that would be the sense here in Washington. I think that they know who Mark Carney is. They don't know Pierre Poilievre. He's a lifelong politician from Ottawa. They know a central bank governor of 2 G7 countries. I don't think there's anyone in the history of the world who's been a central bank governor of 2 G7 countries.
That's what I mean. Is like everyone's just like creaming their pants talking about him. Like, whoa, the first foreigner in 332 years who was the governor of the Bank of England. It's just like, dude, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, his record wasn't the best as governor of the Bank of England. People will try and argue and blame it on other things. I know there's people dispute whether or not the economic troubles that the UK had was his fault or not. You guys can figure that out yourselves with all the information online. And then we also have, just everything that he's done and advised Trudeau on, right? Like, he needs to specify what did he advise Trudeau on? What did they listen to and what did they not listen to? Because right now he's pretty much their financial advisor on the record books. So all this spending, I don't think it's going to tone itself down at all. Like, I think we're going to keep this spending. It might tone back a bit, but it's not going to cut back enough, in my opinion, if we had Mark Carney. But I don't think that's going to happen anyways. I think, honestly, we're going to end up with, that's the wrong one.
Liberal leadership candidate Chrystia Freeland continues to stake her claim as being the one best suited to take on U.S. President Donald Trump. She did it today in the opinion section of the New York Times. In her op-ed, Freeland says when tariffs come down, Canada's Prime Minister must be prepared to act immediately. Here with some more on this and the overall state of the Liberal leadership race is Rosemary Barton, the CBC's chief political correspondent. Thanks for making time, Rosie. So let's start.
Trudeau's favorite CBC Liberal journalist, guys.
With that op-ed, what does it tell us about where Freeland is in this race?
You know, this op-ed and a couple other interviews that she's done with CNN over the past 10 days or so, I think mark a real shift in how she started this race. As you said, now trying to position herself as the tough person to take on Donald Trump, as the person who knows how to respond to him, who's dealt with him before. When I talked to her on the Sunday after.
Yeah. You know, it just got me a funny thought. A great Dominion. The CPC is just worried about Canadians becoming hyper-focused on the LPC race. That is why they are organizing rallies again, starting with the big one in Ottawa this weekend. You know, do you know what's funny is that do people like people participating in the polls, do they realize it's not like a liberal leader? Like, do they understand what the poll is? Like, are they getting elections mixed up and confused? Because yeah, like there's so much going on right now. You know, we're kind of have this like weird calm before the storm. I feel like this leaked memo that they probably intentionally leaked. Like stuff like this doesn't just slip out that easily, right? Like, oh, it just fell into CTV's lap. Sorry, guys. Like it doesn't happen very often. You're by accident. So the idea that we're like, you know, this whole early election coming, like we have some kind of tidbit of information. The only one who said otherwise is Karina Gould. So she's the only Liberal Party candidate who has said she will not call an election, depending on the where the trade war is at, essentially.
The Saturday of the initial announcement, the executive order of the tariffs, she was very much aligned with the government, supporting the government, not putting forward her own ideas. And she, of course, signed that letter with the other leadership contenders saying, we're going to be united. We know that we have to take this on together. That has now changed. She is positioning herself in a completely different way, really aggressively putting forward her approach. In the case of the op-ed here, she says that the 25% tariff on Canadian aluminum is an act of self-harm and economic self-mutilation by the Americans.
Words.
Yeah. And she also says that
Thanks to those who liked the stream, by the way. I appreciate it.
retaliatory list should be published immediately for maximum pressure, unlike what the government is doing now, which is to hold it and see where things go. You know, I think this speaks to the fact that Freeland is still having a hard time pulling herself away from her legacy with Justin Trudeau, her time as finance minister. So this is an area where they think perhaps she can carve out a little bit of ground. And I should say she's also, of all the candidates, put out the most policy planks, the most detailed policy planks to date, right? She's had beyond the tariff, she's had the military, tax cuts, how to approach grocery prices, daycare, and even today, some ideas around healthcare and recruiting doctors back from the United States. She also took...
Yeah, if anyone's curious about the prorogation hearing, Northern Perspective's been putting out like frequent updates on their Twitter page, as well as like YouTube shorts and stuff. Go check out Northern Perspective if you want any updates on that. They're like the only one I know is covering it in depth and pretty on it, like impartially. Like the guy at Northern Perspective is so like monotone. I feel like he, you know, it's hard to take him as like incredibly biased.
Took a swing at Mark Carney, and I had your Canada interview yesterday where she said, listen, it would not be ideal for Canada to find itself in an election during all this in March, for instance, and or April. And for that reason, we should have a prime minister who already has a seat inside the House of Commons. And that, of course, would be her.
Well, and speaking of Mark Carney, he was out today. Tell us more about how he's positioning himself with regards to these U.S. tariffs.
Listen, first of all, he is running the campaign of a front runner, right? Whether he is or not, that is what he is doing. And that means being careful, not doing too many media veils, not putting too much in the window even. And that also remains true when it comes to Donald Trump. He has taken the approach that the government can take care of this until he is part of the government. Here's a little bit of what he said today.
Canadians. And I'm not speaking about leadership contenders. I'm not speaking about current governments, federal or provincial. Canadians are united on this issue. Canadians have a strong sense of resolve. We're going to stand up collectively for Canada, and we're going to build our economy here in Canada first and foremost. And we'll see what arrangements we come with the Americans when we get to the table.
So he even said, listen, I'm going to be careful in what I say on all of this. He was out there in British Columbia to talk about housing, standing in front of modular homes, saying he had spent a lot of time talking about it. What he proposes to do with modular housing, that was not in any way detailed in his announcement.
It's just subliminal messaging. Like that's what they stand by. Like, hey, let's go stand at a port. Hey, let's go stand in front of new building homes, or like like newly built homes. And then like what was Poilievre's whole thing of going all the way to like the Arctic, basically, like the Arctic region, to do a press conference. Like, I don't know what that, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's all subliminal messaging. It's just like this way of presenting themselves, right?
Announcement today. He was asked, though, about that push that Chrystia Freeland made to him around Parliament versus an election. And he said, listen, I'm not going to make a decision before a decision needs to be made. Lots of things are moving. If Parliament needs to be recalled, that will happen. If I need to seek a mandate to govern, I will seek that. Without a seat, you can see how he will start to make the argument that an election is needed very quickly. I'll just say on the other candidate who was out today, Karina Gould, she was out east. She also talking a little bit about securing the Canadian social safety net, expanding employment insurance, even moving towards a universal basic income. And she actually positioned those policy ideas.
You know, talk about further left. If you want the Liberals to take a step further left than Trudeau, vote Karina Gould in. Like, what the hell? You're talking about UBI? Like, get out of here. Like, that is literally the definition of socialism to me. Like, that is when you are you're a socialist society, in my opinion. Like, you're kind of putting capitalism behind you as a full, you know, like, you're no longer purely capitalist at that point, I feel like.
Ideas as a response to Donald Trump, too, saying this would be a way to support Canadians through all of this. And then finally, remember that Monday is the next deadline for that big dump of cash, $125,000. Then we'll see who's actually going to be able to get in this debate in a month's time.
Okay. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed on this. Rosemary Barton, of course, the CBC's chief political correspondent. And it's Thursday. You can catch more of Rosie tonight on At Issue on the National.
Really?
I want to talk about the Liberal
leadership. You guys know
leadership.
that? You can catch more of Rosie I know she's everybody's favorite. So.
Candidates, because they are weighing in on when the next prime minister should send Canadians to the polls, especially as the country deals with the potential for incoming U.S. tariffs.
Ce ne sera pas idéal pour nous d'avoir une élection en mars ou en avril.
That is Chrystia Freeland, of course, speaking with our colleagues at Radio-Canada, saying it is not ideal to have a federal election in March or April because of Donald Trump's threats.
Yeah, well, I'm glad Mark Carney doesn't agree with her on that.
Candidates Karina Gould and Mark Carney were also asked about the election timing today.
I think we need to see where we are on March 9th. If we are in a full-blown tariff war with the U.S., that might be a reason not to go to the polls.
You know, you never take a decision before you need to take a decision. And so nothing is pre-wired. Let's see what the situation is in the middle of March.
And a lot of people are taking Mark Carney's response here as, well, if you weren't going to do it, you would have just said you weren't going to do it, right? Which I take it as if you're going to say you're not, or you're going to say, if you're not going to say you are or you aren't, you probably are. Or at least you're considering it as an open option.
March. If Parliament needs to be recalled for certain reasons, it will be. If it makes sense to get a strong mandate at that point, that is what will follow.
Meanwhile, the New Democrats are preparing all candidates and campaign staff for a snap federal election. In an internal memo obtained by CBC News, the party's national campaign director wrote...
Yeah, so CBC got it too, guys. So mysteriously leaked memo that CBC and CTV somehow mysteriously received.
Taking a page from Doug Ford's playbook, the Liberals believe they can turn this crisis into a political benefit for them. For that reason, I am asking all campaigns to be prepared for an election call to come as early as March 10th.
And that means spending money. So people aren't going to just say this without any weight behind it. Chances are one of the NDP, maybe like they probably knew it was going to get out when they sent it out, but chances are someone just blasted it, right? And sent it out to everybody. But it's just like this whole thing to me seems like it's really going to happen at this point, regardless of what, unless Karina Gould gets in place, apparently, or Chrystia Freeland. I don't think either of them are going to win. I feel like they're purposely making themselves seem unappealing, or they're just that unappealing in general.
Let's talk about it with the power panel. Nigon Sinclair, Cameron Ahmad, James Moore, and Françoise Boivin. Cameron, I'm interested in what you think the tolerance would be amongst the Canadian public for attempting to hold off a little bit here. I mean, there's also obviously the opposition parties would play an enormous role in this, but where do you think that Canadians are at in terms of wanting a new government, wanting to have a say in who leads this country through a very difficult time?
Well, I presume that there will be a bit more tolerance than there has been for the Prime Minister not to be calling an election, because he has been facing such widespread problems and unpopularity for a time now, but I mean, we're in a different world, right? And we're facing, the only thing anyone is talking about when it comes to politics is the impact of our relations with the United States. So I think what those clips, all those answers you played from the three candidates are all understandable. And, I don't think it makes sense for them to box themselves in right now, facing all this volatility that we are facing. I think where I'll probably agree with James is a harder case to make to not have Parliament sitting right now, but also even in a few.
Yeah, how can you be making the case things are too bad to have an election, but things aren't bad enough to have Parliament running? It's just like, how can you have your cake and eat it too? Like, you can't, guys. Like you're all being a Jagmeet Singh here.
Weeks time, because this is a very legitimate.
Oh, Cryptomeria, thank you. Thanks for resubbing. Thank you. So our longest lasting member. Cryptomeria's been watching us since there was like 3 people in here. So shout out to Cryptomeria. Thank you.
Crisis and legitimate for parliamentarians to be debating it and to be facing off on it. I mean, I think the Prime Minister laid out why. I mean, he made a justification based on the paralysis that Parliament was facing at the end of last year, which is true. But again, we're in a different place, we're in a different world, and the public will probably ask questions about that, and I'm sure the media will continue to ask questions about that too.
James, I do want you to weigh in here, but I think it's also probably worth noting the context in which Chrystia Freeland made these remarks, or some of the context around them, in which she makes the...
Yeah, no worries. There's no obligation. Like I try to make membership as accessible as possible. We don't really have much to offer. I feel like it's just your guys' way of showing extra support. Me and Saul are trying to get into doing some of these like comedy sketch skits, and we might find ways to like offer you guys maybe first peeks at that kind of stuff, something like that down the line. And we're going to be putting up some emojis and stuff. It's stuff I got to figure out. It's on my to-do list, but thank you very much. We appreciate it. You can become a member for as little as $1 a month. And yeah, I know we appreciate all the support we get. There's no obligation at all. Right now, we don't have much benefit for it besides just highlighting your name in the chat. So thanks again, Cryptomeria. We appreciate it.
Point that because of all of this crisis and the need for, in her view, continued discussion, it is also important for the Liberals to choose a leader who already has a seat in the House of Commons. So this is also about her. It is very transparently, I think, about her making the case that she is the right candidate. But I'm interested, James, in what you think about the public.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, because I wasn't sure it was going to go. I was not expecting Saul to get as into it as he did. I was shocked by Saul's performance. I was like, oh, Saul's actually funny. I said to Saul before he did that, I'm like, I don't know if you can do this. I did a version of it, but Saul didn't like my version because I was too angry, apparently, me being the angry liberal. But Saul pulled it off, I think, very well. And I was surprised. Before he did that, I didn't tell him, hey, good job, good on you, you're going to do great. I just said, you know what, Saul, you're not really that funny, so I don't know how this is going to go. It's probably going to suck. That's literally what I said to him, because I was just in a bad headspace. And I was kind of a dick, and I just said that to him. And he's like, I'll prove you wrong. And then he proved me wrong. He did. So I'm really glad it turned out really well.
Mood and tolerance, and I suppose it's about time to bring the opposition parties into this discussion as well.
Yeah, look, it's time for an election, I think, very clearly. In a democracy, the majority has rights. The majority of members of parliament, the NDP, the Bloc, and the Conservatives, they want an election campaign. They don't have confidence in this parliament. And so, look, if Mark Carney, who's likely going to win the Liberal leadership race, not only is he not a member of parliament, he's never even sought a seat in parliament. He's never received a single vote from a single Canadian until he will in this.
Yeah, it's a small obstacle, apparently, these days to get elected. So, not being an MP is just a minor inconvenience these days, apparently.
Second week of March in the Liberal leadership race. So, I mean, for him to then assume the prime ministership and kind of captain the Parliament and the government of Canada until
we did a short. It's like a comedy sketch short TikTok thing we put up on the channel. If you guys want to check it out.
All without ever having sought public office, I think is not credible in a democracy. And also, given what Donald Trump frankly said today about, almost threatening that the United States would not abide by the NATO commitment that a threat against one, an attack against one is an attack against all, that he wouldn't necessarily protect Canada's national security needs as an ally traditionally does through our NATO commitments, plus the tariff threats, plus the status of the Canadian economy, plus all the...
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Great Dominion. That's what's funny when they try and sell Pauly of like, he's a career politician. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. He's the most experienced out of all you, is all I hear. Someone's got a lot of experience. What's that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is that? How is it a bad thing in these days? Like, it was the same thing with Joe Biden. I said to Saul, like, you know, it doesn't have a bad ring. Like, I was like, they shouldn't have been focusing on that. This career politician, it's like, it doesn't make someone sound bad to me. It's like, would you rather have someone who's been doing something for 20, 30 years or someone who's never done the job before? You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have issues if you've never been in that climate before, if you've never operated within that system. And I just feel like Poilievre being a career politician is highly beneficial, in my opinion.
The challenges that we're facing internally, the idea that Parliament would not be stood up and cannot stand up because we have a Liberal leader who's not a member of Parliament is just not appropriate. I think Mark Carney wins inside of 48 hours. He should go to the Governor General, call a campaign. We'll have this done in 36 days, hopefully have a robust and thoughtful pan-Canadian debate about what the next decade is going to look like, then have a government in place by the first week of June, and then get on with getting on with nation building again. And we've burned 6 months. We will have burned 6 months of lost time and lost opportunity to have Parliament doing meaningful things. And it's unfortunate. People can blame whoever, but it doesn't matter. What matters is what's next. And what's next is we need to have a...
Doesn't matter. We lost 6 months of... you know what I mean? Like, out of all this, we're losing 6 months of our country operating and progressing for real. Not just this, like, whatever the hell's going on right now.
Clear government with a clear mandate, a Parliament that stood up in session and doing good things for Canadians.
Françoise, I'd like to ask you about this memo from the NDP, first obtained by CBC News. It's been leaked to several other media outlets. Like, what is the NDP really doing here? They've obviously been preparing for an election for some time.
Yeah, they leaked it to several outlets. So an accidental leak, guys.
So what is the purpose of sort of getting this particular note out into the public sphere?
But I do think it's to give the impression that they are getting ready. My initial reaction was like, this letter should have been sent maybe 2 months ago, because you already knew. So you don't have much time to go fill in your roster and make sure you have candidates in all ridings within Canada. So that being said, I want to go back to the fact that I think the saving grace of this Parliament that has been dysfunctional since at least 5-6 months, if not more, is the Trump factor. After the 20th of January, the public wanted the government out, now has to look into it, into an election. And that's why I said it in January, that as soon as the leader of the Liberal Party is elected, we are going into an election. Whatever Chrystia Freeland thinks, the argument she used, it's probably her only one that she can hope and pray that will resonate with the membership.
Yeah, well, I feel like Chrystia Freeland's running on this like Donald Trump hates me campaign, and yeah, he called her freeloader apparently the other night. That was kind of funny.
I doubt very much, because even membership, the Liberal membership, is not at that saying anymore. Everybody wants to see where we are going as a country. As much as people were against the carbon tax, housing, le coût de la vie, cost of living, things like that. Now it's more all this plus what is coming. They need to hear from the front contenders where they want to bring Canada and have their say on it. And there's no amount of months of a sitting new leader that would give some type of calmness into the situation. I think Canadian wants to have their say on the matter.
Nigan, one of the arguments...
Well, some of the chat's saying that they think that they shouldn't be paid during a prorogation. It's like, I don't know. I argue against that just because, like, you know, it sucks when it comes to, like, the sitting cabinet and knowing how much they all make, too. But when it comes down to, like, all the other parties, like, it's not like they want to prorogue. And they're being forced out of Parliament, too. So I understand why they continue to be paid, right? Like, it makes sense. It's not... And in all honesty, in good faith, should be doing whatever they can for their own ridings, like whatever they can go do, right? Go out in the riding, go campaign, go do something, right? And that's what Poilievre and the Conservatives, I think, have done really well, is showing some kind of public presence this whole time. But the Liberals, they didn't come out till like February. They were all like just acting like it was a normal holiday, you know, like a normal, nothing, you know, business as usual. And I think that's the problem with them, is they're so complacent. You know what I mean? They need to get thrown out of power. Like, the Liberals have just become too complacent, too weak, too beholden to their own interests. That's what I got to say.
It's, that I think I've heard made of critics of the Prime Minister is that perhaps Trump is treating Canada a particular way, poorly, obviously, because of a feeling of animus towards the Prime Minister or a sense that he is politically weak because he is a lame duck Prime Minister. Do you think it's realistic, Nigan, to imagine that Donald Trump will treat the next Prime Minister of Canada and perhaps another Prime Minister after that in a short period of time, it really remains to be seen, differently?
Well, I mean, the continual references to Trudeau as Governor Trudeau, I think, is indicative of the kind of relationship that he thinks of Justin Trudeau. He thinks of him as someone to push around, someone that he doesn't have to give any time of the day to. And I think that that's generally how he treats women. And so I think that if it was Chrystia Freeland, which the polls don't suggest would be, I think that would be in a position in which he would absolutely not treat her with a bit of respect. It would be really up to Freeland to be able to make her stand, which is perhaps suggesting why her rhetoric is certainly a lot more stronger than Carney. Carney seems to be using a rhetoric where it's like a wait and see attitude. We're not going to make a big stand until we see all the kind of cards. Freeland is not only behind, she's also stepping up her rhetorics because I think she wants to show a strong front, and she's aware that Trump's treatment of women is rather porous. The one person who should be perhaps wanting an election out of all of this, and just to pick up on what James said a minute ago, might be Mark Carney, because the polling suggests that he would do very well. He's brought the Liberal Party at least to a competitiveness in sort of phantom polling if he was the leader. And the one person who's been missing in all of this debate and kind of calling out for...
No, he's saying Justin hates women. That's what he's saying. He's saying, we've seen how Justin treats women. And, it's just funny because it's really funny for them to throw the like DEI stuff back. And this is like the left throwing it at the left. You know what I mean? Like, it's the NDP guy.
Arctic sovereignty or starting a Navy Army base in the north has been Pierre Poilievre. There has been a real absence in this whole debate, maybe because maybe because everyone else is taking up the airspace. Maybe he doesn't have a response to some of the major issues around.
I think Poilievre's playing it well, sitting back and letting it crash and burn. Because honestly, like, they're destroying themselves to a point. Like, until these new polls came out, like, and I think really it's just because of Mark Carney. And if Mark Carney doesn't win the Liberal leadership, those are going to plummet 100%. I literally feel like the only reason people like the Liberal Party is people like Mark Carney. There's a lot of elderly people in this country who really like Mark Carney. Like, they love Mark Carney. Like, a lot of people 65 plus in this country that just absolutely love Mark Carney. And that's because they saw him previously in previous like forms of government when things were good, times were good, right? The whole financial, like everything that happened in Canada when Mark Carney was Governor of Bank of Canada, you know, arguably went pretty well. But is it really because of everything he did? That's arguable, right? So I think when you contrast that with what, you know, his record in England, and again, people are arguing whether or not it was him that caused that disaster as well. But you know, we got to do our own research and figure it out, I guess, at this point. I don't really have an exact answer for anybody at this point.
Tariffs or it's just been a huge vacuum from the Conservative leader where for months and years we've seen him take up such a large amount of airspace in social media in particular, and we have seen a real absence, maybe for the first time since he became leader, by Pierre Poilievre. It might be Carney's time. He might be a person who actually might want this election, but maybe not right away. Maybe he is taking a wait and see attitude.
Cameron, in that regard, we had Rosie on earlier in the show, and
Janet says she's held her and does not agree with what I was saying. So I'm just saying, there's the demographic 65 plus Mark Carney does very well with, arguably a lot better than Pierre.
she was talking about the fact that Carney is running what looks like a front-runners campaign, really hasn't put a lot of policy on the table, which is a strong contrast to Chrystia Freeland, who has regularly been sending out emails with several policy proposals in them. Can Mark Carney, were he to win, continue like that because Donald Trump is the dominant issue, or does he owe Canadians a bit more of an explanation of what his vision for the country would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that he is running that type of campaign right now. I mean, as a Liberal, of course, what I want to see is the strongest possible, and of course respectful, internal debate amongst all the contenders. And I think that's what all liberals want to see is who has, of course, the best ideas and how are they stacking them up against each other. It is harder when you're running against members of the same team and you all largely believe in the same things. But yeah, right now is an opportune moment to be saying, here's exactly how I'm going to lay out my vision for the country. And not only am I going to explain how I'm going to deal with Trump, but I'm also going to show you that I'm best positioned to deal with Pierre Poilievre, and I'm the best person to win against Pierre Poilievre. Like they have both of these arguments that they need to win as candidates. So yeah, I think the debate coming up in a very short time will be they'll all be on the hot seat to explain their policies on both those fronts, on Trump and on Poilievre.
James, a quick last word from you.
About what? I don't know where we are right now.
Well, I guess I'm wondering the fact that they have spent so much time being asked about Donald Trump. I wonder if there is how that plays into the fact that they haven't spent as much time, perhaps, as they might otherwise have, talking about their approach to Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, but how can you not? And by the way, it's probably good proving ground for the next 4 years, right? I mean, it's our largest trading partner. 1 in 5 Canadian jobs is dependent on trade with the United States. There are historic trading and security and defense ally. We are each other's, most important partners in terms of mutual wealth. So I think it's going to be a fundamental part of the equation going forward. So I think that's fine. And look, Minister Freeland, or former Minister Freeland, I guess, can put all kinds of policies out there. Mark Carney's running on his brand and his reputation. We'll see how far that gets him within the Liberal Party. But I think a lot of Canadians don't know who Mark Carney is. They think they know what he is, and there's a lot of hype around him. And I think you need to be very careful about being an overhyped stock when the Conservatives have a lot of money to define you once you become leader.
Françoise, I'm going to I want a tight last comment from you, but on a slightly different topic. One of the other Liberal leadership candidates, Ruby Dalla, it turns out she will not be able to have a translator in the French language leadership debate.
What do you guys think about this, that they told her this? Did she go? Apparently she put all the money up already for the leadership race. And now they're telling her this. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. What do you guys think about it? Let me know.
He is not fluently bilingual. I just wonder what you think this does to the discussion around the Liberal leadership and the Liberal Party, which has, historically positioned itself as the defenders of official bilingualism.
I was kind of surprised that they would accept the candidacy of somebody who's not bilingual. And I don't mean fluently bilingual, perfectly bilingual, but when you ask to have a translator with you, and I wouldn't be surprised if she'd bring her own. I mean, she has the party to furnish herself one, but I do hope that they put their foot down because I don't want to hear a translator during the French debate. I'll be as a Francophone, a Quebecer, very insulted. So even more so from the Liberal Party of Canada. So I applaud.
It just seems silly though to let that be a deciding factor, right? Like that's so crazy.
Their decision on the matter, and I'm still surprised that she's still running.
Okay, we're going to leave
you can offer your services, Françoise.
James is asking if you want to do it.
No, we all say no.
Stay with your.
Oh, thanks, Brian, for subscribing. Appreciate it.
Optimism, James. Stay with your optimism.
Well, and on that optimistic note, we're going to wrap up this edition of the Power Panel. Thank you to all of you. Nigan Sinclair, Cameron Ahmad, James Moore. And
I'm just saying, like, if that was your only, I understand if there was like an outright disregard for your culture, I get it. But like to me, someone who's rushing into this, I don't know, like I guess I'm not a Francophone, so I'm not really the best person to argue this argument here. But anyways, we're going to go over to cpac.ca and we're going to watch some conservative MP reporters on Parliament Hill this morning, I believe, talking about this same topic. But I have not seen this yet, and we're going to dive right into it, guys.
Concerned about the polls at all? Where the party's standing right now?
We've been consistently concerned about Carbon Tax Carney's failure to provide any transparency to Canadians about his financial interests for half a decade while he's been advising the Carney-Trudeau Liberal government. And there have been if only few questions from the media about how much his megacorp profited while he was advising the government. And this is incredibly important to Canadians after we've had 9 years of a government run by serial ethical lawbreakers from the Prime Minister through his front bench, including ministers who are reoffering and supporting carbon tax Carney in his bid to run the Liberal Party and to be Prime Minister of Canada. It's unbelievable that this guy has provided no transparency whatsoever about what his financial interests are. So Canadians are wondering this. We've been demanding answers, but there hasn't been a lot of...
That's Saul in the chat, by the way, guys. He's the left co-host, or the Liberal co-host of Grounded TV. I'm the conservative, if you couldn't tell.
Of ink spilled on it, and certainly Mark Carney's been in witness protection and hasn't answered a whole lot of questions. So we're going to keep asking those questions. We look forward to seeing and reading the questions that you've put to Carbon Tax Carney about his profits that he's cashed in.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it is like Mark Carney's like ChatGPT, but Trudeau's kind of like Gemini. You know, they're both a little left, but not quite. You know, not quite the same left.
While advising the NDP Liberal government.
This election is going to be about the carbon tax. Do you think this election is going to be about the carbon tax? Do you think it's going to be more about Donald Trump and Canada-U.S. relations?
Look, we are the only party who said that we're going to get rid of the carbon tax. We've heard lies from the Liberals about what they're going to do.
I think Michael Barrett's a little sick. He looks like he's got like snot or sweat all over his face, or he's been crying, or like I feel like he was just coughing and sneezing before coming out here.
With the carbon tax and Carbon Tax Carney committing to bring in a shadow carbon.
Like someone should get this guy a tissue.
Tax on Canadians. A tax by any tax is still taking money out of. A tax by any name is still taking money out of Canadians' pockets, and so this election is about what's best for Canadians, putting Canadians first, and nothing puts Canadians first like axing the carbon tax. Thanks very much.
Why change your message then?
Okay, I saw Andrew Scheer as well speaking with reporters, so we're going to skip to his.
What we can do is cover lost children, people lost.
Here we go, guys. Yeah, James is going fishing again, man. Must go fishing a lot. You know, last time, like, how big was the fish he caught? He was like, oh, it wasn't that big. It was only like 22 pounds. I was like, what? It's pretty big. Biggest fish I've ever caught is like 5 pounds.
Downplaying the opioid crisis that is facing Canada, that Canadians are suffering from. Nearly 50,000 Canadians have lost their lives. Fathers and mothers have lost children. People have lost siblings as a direct result of the 9 years of Carney Trudeau soft on drugs, soft on crime.
Sorry if my comments about the snot are too much for you. Yeah, my comments will be too much for you.
Approach, a direct result of the Carney Trudeau Liberals giving out free opioids, legalizing drug use in public spaces. And to downplay that, to refuse to call it a crisis and just call it a challenge, shows you that he doesn't have to deal with these types of consequences of these policies. He lives in a completely different world. He doesn't have to buy groceries in tough neighborhoods or take public transit. And he made those comments 2 days ago, and yesterday he was in Vancouver, didn't get a single question from the media on this. So why isn't the media holding Mark Carney to account? He's about to become the Prime Minister because a small group of Liberal Party members are going to install him. The least you can do is cover the way he's treating these important issues that are facing Canadians.
Even Andrew Scheer's out of breath. Are they all like running a marathon? Like how many flights of stairs did they just come down? Like they're all like glistening and out of breath.
Est-ce que c'est plus M. Carney qui vous force à faire ça ou M. Trump?
Okay, en premier, c'est inacceptable que M. Carney a nommé un défi. Et on dirait que les drogues, c'est un défi.
Oh, Saul's joining us. There you go.
I'll have my camera up in a sec.
Coin,
He'll balance the budget in 3 years. Who can handle Donald Trump best? And how do you persuade Canadians that you're that choice?
By putting Canada first. If you look at the conversation right now, again, Mark Carney was in Regina. He was talking about steel and and getting our energy to markets. This is a guy who applauded canceling major energy projects that would have made us less dependent on the United States. The Carney-Trudeau Liberal approach has made Canada more vulnerable by telling our allies that we're not going to sell them our clean and ethical LNG. That's ridiculous. The Carney Liberal approach has made Canada more vulnerable and more dependent on the United States.
Dude, that's ridiculous is Saskatchewan for that's fucked up, dude. Like that's what.
Right away. Do you still want an election? Are you concerned about?
Yeah, that's like the politest way of saying it. I think that's it for the Conservative. Oh, here we go. Lanceman. Haven't seen her talk. Speaking of MPs who've been out of the spotlight, actually, since she got, she's being sued for defamation currently by that dude and some organization, I forget what it's called, the CIJA, is with this other dude, I forget his name, or suing her, or no, her and the CIJA and Ezra Levant from Rebel News are all being sued in a defamation lawsuit.
Mark Carney again admitted his own lie about not wanting to impose a carbon tax. In fact, he says he's changing the carbon tax. A new and bigger carbon tax, and in particular insanity, a carbon tax on steelmakers at a time where we're staring down tariffs. This is not...
Well, she's not wrong. He's basically removing the consumer carbon tax, but he's going to amp up the the carbon tax on companies and production, which is just going to raise prices anyways. Like, yeah, you're paying, like the consumer's paying less taxes at the till, but their goods are no cheaper. You know what I mean? I feel like it's going to, like, things might arguably even go up a little bit. You know, certain goods, especially like beef. Like I said, a lot of items that are drastically affected by this.
Taxing the carbon tax. There is only one party that will do that. This is a new and bigger carbon tax.
What do you think about your drop in the polls?
No, I don't think it makes a big difference. And I was going to say, I was kind of making a joke earlier. Did people even understand that was like a federal voting intention poll, or did they think it was just like the liberal leadership race poll? Because like there's just so much so many elections going on at once right now.
Yeah, I know.
Like with the Ontario election too. Like anyway, so there was a leaked memo from the NDP that went to several media outlets immediately. So it sounds like, leaked memo about everyone gearing up for getting all their campaigns ready for an election March 10th. Because it sounds like, I guess, if everyone's going to put their money on something, they're betting Mark Carney's going to win and he's going to call a snap election, capitalizing on the trade war as a political platform.
It's probably a smart move.
Arguably it is, especially with them going up in the polls.
Well, I think everybody would appreciate it too.
But the Conservatives still have a 19-point lead as of this morning in the Bascus poll.
I think calling an election like almost like immediately after the nominations probably the best move, no matter what.
It's the most even if you're honorable thing to do at this point, to salvage the shred of dignity this party has left. Call an election.
Yeah,
it's basically a referendum on what people want to do next. You need to let the Canadian people decide. Screw the polls, screw all that. It's all about having the Canadian people decide our way forward. Because I think that's the way, no one really saw the situation coming. Him joking about us being the 51st state. If those weren't jokes, we basically have the biggest, baddest country, lives next door to us, been our best ally, just got a little bit aggressive with us, right?
A little bit
roughed us up a bit for sure. And hopefully we come out of this stronger, both our countries with a stronger relationship. And hopefully this was all just a way of forcing an election out of us. But we'll see.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you, these incredible Toronto candidates.
Some might argue that's conspiratorial, but I feel like that's politically advantageous for Trump to get Trudeau out of power, because Trudeau does not seem to want to work very well with Trump in terms of he's just incompetent, whether or not he's willing to.
Really honored to be here in Toronto with them all. So I want to lay out what's happening in the next couple of days. This weekend, the GSA holiday will end. So you're going to end up spending.
Yeah, there's a GST holiday on. Did you guys even realize? I didn't even realize. I forgot. It's so not important to me. Barely noticed it on my receipts. I don't know if anyone else can say otherwise.
How do you think that the carbon tax is going to be more noticeable than the GST thing?
I think, yeah, well, on the production side, yes. On the production side, like the consumer side's not that bad, especially in BC. Like we have our own set, which I know that we pay a lot more for like gasoline, for example, because of our carbon tax, but like we're not paying to the same extent, from what I understand, as some people would be with the federal carbon tax, as well as the consumer carbon tax and the carbon tax on production are two separate things. When people talk about everything compounding, it's those two compounding together, and it's multi-steps within a production process that compounds the price of an item because of how many times they're being
Hey,
like,
thanks, Luca.
intercepted.
I just ate a
Luca,
peanut
thank
protein
you.
bar. So that's pretty close to a Snickers.
Yeah, no, and Luca gave me the full quotes, and I read them out, and I was like, you know what?
Yeah, I heard
that's
that.
a pretty good
Yeah,
argument. I think Luca's making a pretty good case, honestly.
I don't know if I would say he hates the West, but it's definitely a critique of the West. Yeah,
He said
I think I
morally
read that
rotten.
part of the book.
Morally rotten.
Morally
Apparently we're
rotten,
all-
yeah.
Yeah, me and Luca are morally rotten, I assume.
Isn't that what most people are saying right now? Is that the West is morally rotten and it needs to change course?
Not really. I think most people agreed. Majority of people in the West are pretty good. I think there's like a fringe, woke, loud minority dictating a lot of situations that are losing their power now, and everyone stopped and listened to them. And now we're all moving on. And I feel like finally Trudeau stepping out of power, stepping aside, new Liberal leader. Hopefully they replace this clown on the screen too, for the NDP's sake, because I don't know if they know.
Yeah, they need a new leader bad,
it's
dude.
just so bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But we're entering a new era.
You know what's so funny
You know
is,
what I mean?
as
It's
much
like-
as he's been compared to AOC, like AOC is a better politician than Jagmeet because he hasn't been able to change it up at all. You know, like he's been singing the same note for the last how long has he been the leader for? At least 8 years, right?
Yeah, well, it's funny because people are criticizing Mark Carney because he went to BC and he was talking about the carbon tax, and most people don't give a shit because we have our own, like except for production. Apparently, like where I live, for example, we're getting all the beef from Edmonton, right? So if Alberta has a carbon, like we're gonna feel that more here than like, you know, certain places down south, right? Or things that are produced within BC, right?
Paying more for the things that you need. So more for diapers, more for children's clothing, more for grab and go food at the groceries. I think that is wrong. I think it's wrong that you're gonna have to pay more for things, particularly in the current context. We've got the threat of a trade war. We got tariffs from Donald Trump. People are worried that they might lose their job. They're worried that prices are gonna go up at a time when they're already so high. I think it's wrong that the government is choosing to do this now. But I think it's particularly wrong if you look at the choices this government's making.
You know what I find particularly wrong is that almost 6 months ago, he ripped up that agreement, and there has still not been an election. There has been no change in his party's approach platform. He is just such a, I don't even know. Like, he's about as fake as that sweater he's wearing right now.
They're choosing to stop giving people a break, to stop giving you and your families a break, but they're choosing to flip-flop on capital gains to give millionaires a break. Those earning over $1 million, they want to give them a break. I think that is absolutely wrong. Mark Carney said that giving a GST break to working people is a bad idea, but he thinks it's a good idea to flip-flop on the capital gains and give more money to millionaires. I think that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. What a new Democrat government would do, what we would do.
He's going to bring up his Tesla tariffs again.
Together, we would give you a break. I'm proposing that a new Democrat government would permanently remove the GST off of essentials. Essentials like your home heating bill, like your cellular and internet bills, giving you a break on the things that you need, like your grocery, grab and go groceries, diapers, children's clothing. Working folks, everyday people need a break.
Yeah, there's already no GST on fresh foods, guys, by the way. So any fresh fruit, produce, meat, all that stuff, any fresh foods, from what I understand, there is no GST on it anyways. Just keep in mind when he says essentials.
Not millionaires. With New Democrats, we're going to give you a break. With Mark Carney and the Liberals, they want to give millionaires a break. I think that's wrong.
So let me get this straight. Poilievre wants to give billionaires a break, and the Liberals want to give millionaires a break. Oh no, guys. Does Jagmeet Singh not realize that he's a millionaire? Like, he's a millionaire, guys. He is literally a millionaire. Like, I'll find his net worth right now.
Ce fin de la semaine, le congé de la TPS va arrêter, ça veut dire que vous allez payer plus pour les choses dont vous avez besoin. Ça veut dire que vous allez payer plus pour les couches, plus pour la nourriture préparée à l'épicerie. Vous allez payer plus. Je pense que c'est la mauvaise chose à faire.
Yeah, his net worth, so Jagmeet Singh's net worth is estimated at $78 million, according to HamariWeb.com. I don't know how honest this website is, but they're saying he's worth 70. They got his height on here and his weight. That's weird. They got his weight, 76 kgs, 6 feet 2 inches. Where are they getting this information from? $78 million apparently he's worth.
Faire à ce moment, je pense que les libéraux ont
That
tort
sounds
de
like a
faire ça
lot.
parce que les gens ont peur.
Sounds like a little too much to be a man of the people. And dude, he literally was saying Poilievre wants to give billionaires a break and Carney wants to give millionaires a break. It's like, what are you saying?
I was listening. I know. I was picturing him like writing a speech and he has to write one about Carney and he's like erasing the B's and putting M's. He's like, oh, that'll work.
Oh yeah, it's like, oh, I figured it out, guys. It just like get a Sharpie, cross the B off, put an M for the for the anti-Mark Carney speech.
M for Mark.
Yeah.
Commercial avec les États-Unis, avec les tarifs de Donald Trump, ça veut dire que les choses, le coût de la vie va augmenter. Donc, c'est le mauvais moment de faire ça. Mais ce qui est pire encore, c'est le fait que les libéraux leur volte-face aux travailleurs de la TPS, il a pensé qu'avec les TPS sur un coup de main au.
All right, Sam, I want to ask about this memo that was going around to NDP candidates talking about the prospect of an election call as soon as March 10th. The NDP still needs about 200 candidates to have a full slate by that date if the election were called then. And we're seeing, polling pointing to, a potential trend of NDP supporters breaking off to the Liberals. How do you try to get people back on board?
They lost 4 points. So they lost like 25% of their support, basically, in one poll, if you think about it.
Especially if an election is happening within 3 weeks here.
Yeah, our understanding is Mark Carney's going to
Which book is that from? The Morally Rotten.
Preparing for that.
Apparently from Values as well. I didn't think Mark Carney.
I can't find it. I've just searched the book. I can't find it.
Has he written multiple books? I don't know. Apparently it's in the book Values.
We're getting ready for that. We've nominated 140 candidates already. More to come, and so we'll be ready to fight this election. This election is going to be an important choice, and so I want to remind folks: the Liberals have had 9 years. What has happened in those 9 years since the Liberals have been in power? Well, your cost of homes went up.
Oh, thanks, guys, for all the likes, by the way. I appreciate it.
Cost of groceries went up. Things are worse now. Ask yourself, are you better now after 9 years of Liberals, or are you worse off?
Dude, you propped them up. Like, how stupid are, like, you know what I mean? Like, you propped them up. Like, you are just as guilty. You have cookie, like, chocolate all over your face too, buddy. Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if there was a cake, you ate it too.
Canadians are going to say they're worse off. Changing the leader doesn't change the fact that they had 9 years to make your life better and they made it worse. And now what about the Conservatives? Well, Pierre Poilievre is proposing to do things that are going to make your life worse. He said that he wants to cut childcare. That's going to cost.
Yeah, like I'm looking up all these terms in the book. The climate emergency terms in there once, but it's in a totally different.
I'm pretty sure he has like a whole chapter.
Is it a different book
in that?
Yeah, but the term climate emergency.
You're not gonna be able to Google it very well. Usually, you'll have to. Get
No, I have the book. I have the ebook open on my computer, and I'm word searching in it.
Okay.
At minimum $8,000 a year if he cuts childcare. He wants to cut the child benefit. That's another $600 a month for working families, for everyday folks. He wants to cut the dental care program for seniors. Seniors who barely just got the dignity of getting their teeth fixed. Over 1.5 million people have been able to get their teeth fixed with the new Democrat dental plan. He wants to cut that. He doesn't think people deserve that.
You know what's so funny is, you know who took credit for that dental plan? The Liberals. Mark Holland. Do you not remember Mark Holland saying how much they delivered dental for seniors? Like, and Poilievre wanted to take it away? Like, how many times I've heard that? Like, you know what I mean? It's just so funny. Because it's like, dude, like, you have done nothing but propagate the worst government in Canadian history.
That's going to cost people. He wants to propose cuts that will hurt people, that will cost people. He's voted against these things, and he's going to put in place cuts that are going to hurt you. And what do we want to do? We want to defend those things that people need, invest in our healthcare, take better care of people, and lower your bills. Take on the corporate greed that's driving up the cost of your groceries.
Can we pause this for a second? The quote is from an opinion article by Peter Foster, where he says in his book Values, Building a Better World for All, the only part that's actually in a quote is the word climate emergency. Former governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England claims that Western society is morally rotten and that it has been corrupted by capitalism, which has brought about a climate emergency that threatens life on Earth. This, he claims, requires rigid controls on personal freedom, industry, and corporate funding. The only part that's in quotes is climate emergency.
So there's no Western.
I don't know. I can't even find the word. I'm going to look again. Western society. Western society. It's not even in the book. Yeah, like the term isn't even in the book.
Bring down the cost of housing so people can afford a home. I think the choice is clear in this next election. The Democrats have your back.
All right, but just on the polling front though, we're seeing the NDP's numbers falling quite dramatically from several different pollsters right now, and that support seems to be bleeding over to the Liberals. How do you try to tell people that what you want to do is actually helpful for them, where it seems like people are seeing the Liberals as the better alternative to the Conservatives?
Normally in a leadership race, there's some attention on that party, and I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned is that people were let down over these past 9 years. Like, I talk to people again and again, they tell me,
who I feel the most let down by is actually Jagmeet. Because, like, honestly, the amount of times I thought he might actually vote non-confidence and just didn't. You know what I mean? Like, no one has disappointed me more than Jagmeet Singh. Because Trudeau, I expected it. I don't know why I expected anything less until we started doing this channel.
Yeah, he's surprised me too.
Everything he did, and now that I watch absolutely everything he does, I realize how empty he is and how everything he says means absolutely nothing. And you have no idea what he's actually going to do. He's just going to do whatever the hell he wants to.
He has no I don't think he has any principles. I think he's just like a
yeah.
I can't ever.
He just wants to blow whatever way he wants to make it look like he's doing the right thing, but he doesn't actually care about.
Worth 78 million. That's a hell of a lot more than I thought.
That seems really high. I don't know, maybe, but
I think
isn't that higher than Mark Carney's net worth?
I heard that his home alone was like 3.5-4 million. I heard that Jagmeet Singh's home alone was worth more than Pierre Poilievre's whole net worth.
Someone put Mark Carney as $96 billion USD, but I don't think that's
not true at all. That is insane amount of money. I think
I'm like Googling it.
Mark Carney's got a huge net worth though. He's worth like 20 million or something, but he's not worth.
I thought it was the same as Pierre, or were we looking up somebody else that time? I can't remember.
No, that had to do with all their assets. I think that had to do with like their property value and a couple other things, like where I don't know. It's a lot of weird things because Poilievre owns a couple houses that he rents out or something.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with a politician being a millionaire.
Well, no, there's nothing wrong with investing your money, right? As long as you're not taking your position to make money, right? It's different when you're like trying to create policy that benefit and grants that benefit you and your friends and stuff that you scratch each other's backs. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Says Carney's only worth 5 million, estimated 5 million on this website. I don't know.
I think the highest I found was like 3.6.
I don't trust any of these.
Yeah, it's hard to tell, right? Like, how are you going to know how much they're worth?
I think they just make numbers up a lot. You're not going to like AI websites.
Like, honestly, I feel like the most you could do is like, they drive this car, they have this house, they own these stocks, these are all worth this. That's all you can really do, right? Like, there's not much more like that's public knowledge. You're not going to know their personal finances, right? But I definitely think I know that it doesn't blow me away because Singh does also have his wife's very successful on Instagram. She's got a crazy, I think hundreds of thousands of followers or something like that.
Dude, like people just don't read things because the 96 billion quote, it's from an article about Carney, but where they're talking about Bloomberg having an estimated net worth of $96 billion. But if you just Google it, it pops up 96 billion in the article without showing you who they're talking about.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Not super helpful.
No. My cost of rent has skyrocketed. The cost of groceries has gone up. And what did the Liberals do in that time? They let corporate grocery stores rip you off. They said they were going to ask them nicely to lower prices, and they didn't do it. Obviously, that's not going to work. We're proposing a price cap on food essentials to impose a price cap to bring down the cost of food immediately. And so for folks that feel let down, you've been let down and you deserve better. You don't deserve a government that let you down for 9 years. You deserve someone that's going to fight for you. And the Conservatives are not the solution. They have shown again and again, Pierre Poilievre has shown you what he wants to do. He wants to cut the things that you need. He has said it. He wants to cut pensions for seniors. They cut it before when they were in power.
These
They want
people
you
in
to
the
work
back do
longer
not
and
look
earn
very
less.
confident in
So
him.
he's voted that way before. He wants to do that in the future. Seniors deserve better. Families deserve better. We want to defend the things that you have.
This lady in the back
We
looks
want
like
to
she's falling
defend our
asleep.
pensions, defend our healthcare, and improve them. And we want to lower your bills. We have a real plan to do that by taking on corporate greed, by taking on the corporate grocery stores that are ripping you off. We know that they're ripping us off. They ripped us off with the cost of bread, and most recently with the cost of meat, where they included the packaging weight in charging you and ripping you off in a systematic way across the board. We're the only ones calling out that corporate greed and taking on the ones that are ripping you off. So if you want lower bills, if you want homes you can afford, you Democrats are the ones.
Yeah, that's a good point, Green Dominion. There are no billionaires in Canada's parliament, nor are there ever likely to be any. You know what I mean? People underestimate like how we're not that prestigious.
How much money that is. It's unfathomable to the average person, like how it's 1,000 millions. Like it's so much money.
Nous allons maintenant à Juliane Lapointe de Radio-Canada. C'est à vous.
Okay, well, here's
Bonjour.
the questions. Hopefully they're asking about the leaked memo now.
Les conservateurs essaient encore.
C'est des administrations.
Vous avez répété que le
All French, okay. Is that their video? Just crashed?
On va régler ça, puis...
Mid-press conference. So just nothing but French and then crash.
Entendez?
Ça fonctionne.
Still in
Please
French.
go ahead.
All right, guys. Like, figure how low budget
Mike, if
is
you're trying
this?
to give it another shot.
How awkward and low
Oh,
budget
can you
is
hear me
this?
now?
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay,
Let's
sorry.
go.
There's the unmute button.
Yeah, I don't think any billionaires are funding anything in Canada. Like, this is every press conference, by the way. This isn't just his press conference. I don't think
This is Elon Musk calling in right now.
Like, the funding is so low for all this public stuff. I feel like.
Okay.
After so many years, you think we would have figured it out. Okay, so
Yeah,
you've said over the last number of weeks that you're going to vote to bring down this government and force a spring election. But if you're given the choice when Parliament comes back between helping workers and bringing down the government, what will you do?
I appreciate the question. You know, we've been really clear on this.
No, you
the
haven't.
government
I've
has
seen the
had
lady
2
in
months.
pink, Rhonda.
We could have called back Parliament weeks
You have not been really clear on this.
ago. We called on the government to recall Parliament to put in place supports for workers. Workers are already seeing job losses, and now we've got tariffs in place on steel and aluminum that are going to affect those workers. We've said from the beginning, we need a package of supports in place now. As soon as the threats were clear, we needed a package of support for the workers. I was on a call with all the leaders of opposition and the Prime Minister. I was the only leader to raise the point that we need this support package for workers. In addition, we need to realize that there's also going to be some pressures on the cost of living. So we need better protections in place to keep life affordable. We need those things passed in Parliament. There was 2 months to do that. If the Liberals were serious about doing it, they could have recalled Parliament. We could have got these things passed.
If you were serious about ripping it up, you could have voted non-confidence when LeBlanc voted yes in December 16th. You voted no and supported the Liberal government. So what do you think? Like, you know, like LeBlanc voted yes. The NDP literally had the power to trigger an election, and they didn't. So why would anyone take a word this guy has serious? Like, it just drives me nuts. It's just like, God, how is there 15% of the people want to vote for this guy? Like, how does this guy get 15% of the polls? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just ridiculous.
But now it's become clear that Mark Carney's going to call a snap election. He's going to call an election before government resumes at the end of March. So we're preparing for that.
In fairness, that wasn't my question. The question is, if he does bring back Parliament and the choice before you is to either bring down the government or to support workers, what do you do?
Well, I think it's a false choice. That if the government is serious about doing that, they would bring the Parliament back now. Because
Basically, I don't have to answer because they're probably going to do it for me, and I'll be able to get away with never having to answer this question and trying to be blamed at fault for Pierre Poilievre being elected. Like, it's just so stupid. It's like he's happy. It's like, I think he's happy about this. It's like, it's almost like you know, that episode of The Office where Michael Scott like finally gets his out, like the whole episode, he's just dreading something, and then he gets like this out at the end. I feel like this is what it is. This is his out. You know what I mean? This is all he's gonna get.
Yeah, this is taking the extra money as a bonus.
Yeah.
Already losing their jobs. How would it make sense if this escalates and more job losses happen to wait another 30 days before Parliament's resumed and we see massive pain, workers losing their job? How does that make any sense? If the government's serious about putting in place supports for workers, I believe we should do that. I've called on that. Call back Parliament. Let's get it passed immediately. I can't imagine any opposition leader opposing a package to support workers if the government's serious about doing that. Bring Parliament back. Let's do that now. But we are operating under the clear indication by Mark Carney that there's going to be a snap election held early. He's going to call that mid-March, and we're preparing for that.
Nous avons une dernière question avec Olivier Ferron-Boissé avec TVA. C'est à vous.
Oui, bonjour. Bonjour, Monsieur Singh. Ramener les métiers.
C'est le fait clair, près du coup. Aurait dû être partenaire, mais il a fait cette...
Avez-vous vu...
Easy, he got it. He got a bunch of French questions.
Il conclut la conférence de presse.
Look how happy he is. I didn't have to answer anything in English. Thank God. Like, come on, buddy. Anyways, next, just kind of recapping the Canadian political news from today now. I was hoping for more from that. Wob Canoe went on CTV. So we
had a very constructive conversation. We appreciate the Trump administration facilitating this literally in the last minute. And we're grateful. We listened, we communicated, and we look forward to further conversations.
We discuss ways to come back with a good relationship between Canada and U.S. and I think we had answers or ways to progress.
There were some very frank moments across the table.
Dude, every time I see the picture of all the premiers, I see David Eby just looking like an awkward teenager. Like, I don't understand. He just has hands in his pockets, like slouching, but still taller than everybody slouching. Like, you know, it's just like so ridiculous.
And they urged us to take the president at his word. And so we will certainly do that.
It was about this time last night that premiers were leaving the White House, where they met with U.S. President Donald Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, James Blair, and the Director of White House Personnel, Sergio Gore. But how successful were those talks? Well, there was a post on social media by James Blair that may throw some cold water on that. He said, quote, "Pleasant meeting with the premiers. To be clear, we never agreed that Canada would not be the 51st state. We only agreed to share Premier Eby's comments. Further, we said the best way to understand President Trump's position is to take what he says at face value." End quote. So what does that say about those meetings and whether or not Canada can get a reprieve from those tariffs? Wob Canoe is the Premier of Manitoba, and he was in those meetings. He joins me right now. Hi, Premier. Thanks for joining us, and welcome back to Power Play.
Thanks for having me.
So we did just mention that post by James Blair on social media yesterday. When you have that type of clapback from someone in the White House, can you call the last couple of days a success?
Yeah, it was a very successful few days that we spent here as Team Canada, Canada's premiers from every single province and territory. Yesterday was a strong day. We were all there.
Yeah, if you want to talk about Team Canada, that's a better way of talking about it, not just the Liberal Party cabinet. Like originally Team Canada was Melanie Joly and Philippe Champagne and Chrystia Freeland. And now it's at least the premiers are involved. Like it's just...
Together. We had a bunch of meetings as the 13 premiers. We also went to the White House, as you mentioned there. Today, we kind of fanned out into different directions. I had the opportunity to meet with Doug Burgum, the Secretary of the Interior, so a member of the Trump cabinet. He's a former governor of North Dakota. We actually overlapped a little bit, our times in office. So that was big for our team. It's big for Team Canada as well, but big for Manitoba when a member of the Trump administration can point to Manitoba on a map, can say he's been there, he knows about our province. And to be able to make a connection like that, either...
Just happy to be recognized by the American government.
For acknowledging my existence.
Directly with Secretary Burgum or with other folks that we've been meeting with, it's really important. You know, we believe
I don't think Wob Canoe makes very much money as a provincial NDP leader. I'm going to look into it. I'm curious.
No.
idea of relate before you negotiate. Could be that we're heading for a negotiation, maybe a review of the USMCA, the Kuzma deal, the North American Free Trade Deal, as it used to be called. And so to be able to have those relationships first, to be able to have that familiarity, a foundation to be able to relate to, I think is really important.
So I'm curious to know, in that meeting with Secretary Burgum,
man, this dude apparently only billed $20,000 for a year of office operations. What? Apparently that's all he expensed of government money for office operations was $20,000. Apparently it's way more for Jamie saying. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
what did he have to say about the way to get to President Trump?
So his salary is $106,000 a year estimated.
Way to get your message through to, one, push back not only against that whole thing about the 50.
Oh, what? Apparently they get an additional $90,000 on top of their other salary for being premier. Holy crap. So never mind. He's making like $200K a year now as premier. That's a pretty big financial incentive. Jeez.
That's pretty good money.
It's like, hey, we're just going to double your salary now that you're premier.
51st state, but also to try and send the message to the Trump administration what tariffs would do on both sides of the border. Because at this point, it really sounds like a lot of Canadian politicians are trying to send the message, but it's just not punching through.
Well, I'm trying to build the relationship with Doug Burgum as the secretary and, one of the cabinet members. Not everybody's been sworn or confirmed in yet, I should say. And so I'll leave maybe the specifics of what we talked about, but I can tell you that the topics we touched on, we talked a lot about energy, the electricity, baseload power that we send to the States, talked about our jobs and the fact that we've got, ag and so many great connections between our two countries. But one thing that I think really stood out to me over the course of the conversations we had is people telling us that you should take the president seriously, right? And I saw proof of that this week while we were down here. When the other premiers and I talked about the efforts that we've made on the border, that was very well received, and people responded to that. When we talked about critical minerals and energy and electricity, that was very well received. And so when we hear the president talk about the border, talk about fentanyl, talk about these things, it's important that we take that seriously. And then, of course, think about that from our Canadian values. How can we respond to what we're hearing from him in a way that's consistent with who we are as a country, that stands up for our jobs and our economy? And so I think we're going to have to ride.
Yeah, the main reason why we're watching Wob Canoe is to get some insight onto the meeting with the premiers. There hasn't been many that have come out and given a full interview yet. And I'm imagining we'll probably see Daniel Smith and others tonight and tomorrow. We'll probably see those interviews come out. However, right now, this is all we got of it, to my knowledge.
This wave for the next little while, meaning there's going to be a lot of stuff coming at us. We're going to have to be responsive and flexible. We're always going to have to be true to who we are as Canadians. We're going to have to stick up for ourselves at some moments. At other moments, we're going to have to take advantage of the opportunity to work together with our friends here in the U.S. And I think if we do that, there's a really, really good outcome for Manitoba and for Canada as well.
I take your point on all of the conversations you've had, but you made that point there of taking Donald Trump at his word. Again today, he said, quote, Canada is going to be a very serious contender to become a 51st state. So I guess my question to you is, if you can't get the White House to agree on those starting terms that Canada will not be a 51st state, then what hope is there really of getting through to them on everything else?
Well, I think the folks in the White House notice that they get a rise out of Canadians when they say that. Listen, we know that Canada is never going to be the 51st state.
I hear you on that, but respectfully, do they know that? Do they know that?
That's my question. We need to focus on is, well, the thing that I'm saying is if somebody chirps you, you got to be able to chirp back, right? You have to be able to do so with a good sense of...
If somebody chirps you, you got to chirp back. That's such a Canadian thing to say.
Humor. We're a nation of hockey players.
That's next till let's go hack a dart.
We know how to stick up for ourselves when needed, but at the same time, we know how to have that beer with the person on the other team when the game is over. And so I think all of these...
Have a beer with the other person. It's like these sport metaphors.
things we're going to have to bring to bear. It's clear that this new administration is changing the U.S. And as a result, that's going to change the relationship with our country, with Canada. And so we need to be responsive, but we also need to be calm. We need to keep an eye on what the U.S. is saying. We need to put it through that lens of what we've got to do as Canadians to be true to who we are as a country, to stand up for our jobs, to stand up for our economy, to stand up for the Flag Day coming up this weekend, of course. And I think if we do that, there's going to be good things that come from the future of this relationship.
You use the hockey analogy, so I'll go with that one. A lot of people see the whole 51st state thing not as a chirp, but more like a cross-check to the face. So what do you do about that and in terms of responding to it and making sure that we do stand up?
Just keeps the hockey metaphor going, eh?
For ourselves, because for a lot of people, those are fighting words.
Well, I'm still smiling. So I'd say that's the first response. And the reality is this, the President Trump, he commands attention like few other people in the world. And we are going to have to be able to have that ability to chirp back, to push back, to fight back when needed. We're a country, we know how to pull a jersey over somebody's head if required. But at the same time, let's have some finesse to our game too.
Pull a jersey over Trump's head. That'd be really funny.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's have some finesse to our game too. And I know we're torturing this hockey metaphor at this point, but the point that I'm trying to make is that we are building relationships with a new administration. The people that we're meeting here in the U.S., in many cases, they don't have their business cards yet. They've just moved into offices. Some of the people who would potentially be part of a renegotiation or a review, rather, of the USMCA, the Kuzma deal, they haven't even been confirmed yet. Like the nominee Lutnick or the trade representative, they haven't even been confirmed yet. And so really, we're here establishing a foundation. We're establishing the relationships. And I know there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of emotion in Canada, and there's a desire to get the happy ending, to get the quick resolution to the story. But the reality is that this is something that's going to be playing out not over the next 4 minutes or 4 days, but over the next 4 years. And so we're going to have to be calm. I want to send that message of reassurance to Canadians and to just say that we are a country that is proud for a reason. We're a country because we're a country that should be proud because we should have that confidence that we're going to be able to meet this moment and to get through it stronger than ever before.
You talk about the renegotiation. I just talked to Transport Minister and Minister of Internal Trade, Anita Anand, who said the federal government is very open to having conversations as soon as the Trump administration would like to on those renegotiations. Do you want to see that happen before 2026?
Yeah, I think, the words really matter there. And specifically what I should be pointing to is a review. So maybe something that's a bit more about the details, like the U.S. brings forward a few items that they're concerned with. Canada, we've definitely got items that we want to bring to the table. Mexico as well, too. And so I think there should be an openness to have those conversations. And like I said, we're going to have to ride the wave. There's going to be more stuff coming at us. We're going to have to be able to work together when needed. We're going to have to be able to stick up for ourselves as required. But when we get to that negotiation, if we've had some relationship building beforehand, I think things go a lot better. And of course, we got to have our best foot forward there, strong negotiating team with a really good message to share. But if we have some mutual understanding, if we have that rapport with people on the other side of the table, I think that's a recipe for success that works for Canadians.
So just briefly, I want to be clear.
I do think it's nice because he was also one of the guys who said, well, it would be nice to be a part of Team Canada. Like, I think he said something like that at a point. Like, he was making jokes about how they weren't really at the table and how they were just told the plan the first time around. And then it took everything getting to the point where it's at now for them to actually be involved in the plan. It's just crazy. And even then, it's like, is it really doing much besides optics? I don't really know.
You want a full renegotiation before 2026, or you just want to start having conversations about it?
I'm here to extend that warm and hearty handshake to our friends here in Washington, D.C. and to build the relationships.
I'm just here to pass the puck.
I think there's always room for improvement when it comes to trade and making sure that it works for Manitobans and to protect our jobs in Manitoba and across Canada. Realistically, it looks like this thing is headed for a review. If a review means a process where we identify a couple of things to improve from the status quo, and maybe we don't need to go through the whole exercise of a full renegotiation, I think that's something that could work well for us. At the same time, though, there's going to be other issues that continue to come up. And so we just need to have that calmness and that steady hand when we're moving forward on this relationship.
I also want to ask you, you posted on social media yesterday that you met with Elon Musk. What was the context of that, and what message did you give him from Canada for President Trump?
Well, we basically just tripped over him while we were leaving the White House. It wasn't like a formal meeting or anything on the schedule. Rather, it was just...
That doesn't just happen. He went and talked to them. Like, you know, Elon Musk doesn't just stumble upon people. You know what I mean? Like,
he might have just been there, though. I think he just hangs out at the White House a lot.
I don't know. He's just there. No team of security, nothing. Just got his own Secret Service escort, tossing a football around the hallways.
I think he has his own security detail.
When some of the premiers and I were leaving the White House grounds, he happened to be there. I think you obviously hear all the reports about him being very influential as part of this new team in the new administration. And so just stopped in and basically had a short conversation.
Anything you can share with us about that conversation and what kind of message you sent to him on behalf of Canada?
Well, to be frank, I just kind of tried to keep my distance.
Okay, fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew, we appreciate your time today.
Have a good one. Thanks for having me.
That is so awkward. Anyways, so yeah, we're going into this next here a little bit. We're gonna skip over this. Actually, it's just a panel talking about the Jagmeet Singh stuff. I wanted to watch this from yesterday. This was when he was asked about if he'd call an election. I want to watch the full clip here for context. It's only 10 minutes, guys.
Okay.
And there's probably a bunch of French in that 10 minutes too.
Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone.
There we go.
Thanks for coming out. Wanted to come here because I think, as we all know, we have a housing crisis in Canada.
Oh, really? We didn't know this, Mark.
And we need to address it. And in order to
fair.
address the housing crisis, we need to build.
We don't say, as we all know, we wash our hands after we go to the bathroom. It's like, you know, some of those things. It's like, come on, really? Like it's obvious. Yeah. You don't need to address it.
Not
a lot of
everybody
homes,
does, but
just under 4 million homes over the course of the next decade. And there's a series of programs that are being put in place by the federal government, support by provinces and municipalities that are going to help that. But in order really to achieve those objectives, like many of the changes we're going to need to do in Canada, we need innovation. We need to build in a different way. And this is an example of modular housing. It builds on research that's been done here in Vancouver at University of British Columbia. And just to put this in context.
Yeah, he was in Vancouver. Luca, you should have went and said hi to him. I believe you would have, you know what? You could have bought him a coffee.
We can speed up.
You could have passed the puck around a little bit or something.
Increase speeds by 20 to 50%.
Sure.
Reduce waste by almost 50% in the construction process. Reduce emissions over the course of the production process and the lifetime of the building by 20%, and really get housing for people more rapidly, more efficiently, more cheaply, again, cost reductions of over 25%, and build true Canadian technology that not just serves Canadiens here, but ultimately serves around the world. Alors, c'est fondamental afin d'atteindre nos objectifs canadiens et britanniques. Avec cela,
with Trump threatening to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum on March 12, your fellow leadership candidate, Chrystia Freeland, says it would not be ideal to go to the polls right after your party selects its new leader on March 9. What do you think?
Well, I think it's a very fluid situation. The discussions with the Americans, the demands of the Americans change, or at least of the president, change on an almost daily basis, as do the
That's the thing
timeline.
is, that's how he's trying to spin it off, right? Like Trump crazy. Like this is, you know, I don't know. I don't
he is
think it's
kind of
gonna work
crazy,
very well
though.
for him, though.
I mean,
I don't think so. He's outlining.
you listen
what
to
he
him
wants.
talk
He's
lately, he
given
seems out
demands
to
now.
lunch.
There is a list now, though. There's a list.
What's the
now.
list? It's the
literally,
same
he
list as
wants to
before,
tighten
isn't
up
it?
yeah, but no, but there's like it's some
Tighten up our border.
No, it's got
he wants us
specific
to
measures
stop
about
the flow
reducing
of fentanyl.
Yeah, it's got specific measures of extra of what.
I haven't seen that if there's
Vassy read it
actual
out.
specific
Vassy,
ones.
Vassy on CTV read it out.
Yeah, I know, but I looked at the list she was saying. I think she was being a little too good faith there. It wasn't a very specific
Too
list
good
of
faith,
demands.
meaning you're assuming they're just a coherent human being that's writing it. The problem is everyone's just
No, I'm saying she's giving him good faith. She's being very
arguably
like she's giving them a lot of credit there.
You say I don't give enough people like Mark Carney good faith, so
sure.
Maybe you're being a little
I don't know. You can look at the list yourself and tell me if you think it's that specific.
I think it's specific enough. Tighten up the port.
Okay.
Tighten up the ports. I understand
How much?
A lot of it comes
How
from
much
the
money
funding.
they want to
From
spend?
what I hear, the funding's just not there to tighten up the airport security. Like they want our airport security tightened up. They want like what they're asking for is a very tall order for our resources and our current financial situation, apparently. But I think at this point, it's not just about the border. It's about the ports. It's
I just think things like stopping the flow of fentanyl,
airports.
like people have been trying to stop the flow of fentanyl for a really long time. I don't think it's that easy.
Yeah, you're not going to go.
You just have to.
Well, what happened to the war on drugs, right? Like when
Exactly,
did that start?
it didn't go very well.
Right? When did that start, though? Right? It's just all it's all political.
It stopped a long time. Like they realized it wasn't working.
At this point, though, I don't think it's necessarily the same thing. Like there has been terms drawn. Initially, at first, I'll give you that there wasn't a clear idea what was wanted, but there has been people from the Trump admin who have given details outlining what needs to be done to the Canadian government administration. Appointing the fentanyl czar was actually one of those conditions. And now everyone's saying they're not going to be happy with it because Kevin Brasso is a WEF globalist as well, apparently. I don't know much about him personally. I wish they got Davis from Corner Gas. That would have been better representation of Canada.
The government is currently engaged in direct discussions with the Trump administration. You never take a decision before you need to take a decision. And so nothing is pre-wired. Let's see what the situation is in the middle of March and do what is best for Canadians. And the government will do what's best for Canadians. If Parliament needs to be recalled for certain reasons, it will be. If it makes sense to get a strong mandate at that point, that is what will follow.
That's what I mean. Can they really not recall Parliament after he becomes so he can become Prime Minister, just never recall Parliament? Like, is that possible? And that's what I don't understand. Wouldn't he have to recall Parliament for the throne speech to be sworn in as interim Prime Minister?
I don't know.
Like, I'm pretty sure they can't prorogue past that. I think their biggest fear is Jagmeet Singh just prolonging their life.
No mistake, and I think this is a message for the United States, is that Canadians, and I'm not speaking about leadership contenders, I'm not speaking about current governments, federal or provincial. Canadians are united on this issue. Canadians have a strong sense of resolve. We're going to stand up collectively for Canada, and we're going to build our economy here in Canada first and foremost. And we'll see what arrangements we come with the Americans when we get to the table.
And just to follow up, previously all leadership candidates put out a joint statement on Donald Trump's threats. But in the past few days, Chrystia Freeland is back making aggressive proposals about better ways to deal with Trump. Is it constructive to have leadership candidates armchair quarterbacking the government right now?
I'll speak for myself. I'm careful in what I say about the current status of negotiations. You may have seen, I should say, that my focus has majored on what we should do here in Canada to strengthen our economy, irrespective of what the Americans take. And I've a lot of experience in negotiations. One of the most important things in negotiations is that you have options. And of course, a strong Canadian economy is in our interest, is all Canadians' interest. We have many, many ways to do that. I've said from the start that it's time to build. Il faut bâtir l'avenir, and we should do that now to strengthen our negotiating position as well. In terms of the real-time negotiations, leave that to the current Prime Minister and the ministers of the.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought they have to call an election as soon as the party leader's elected. Like, they don't have a choice. They have to resume Parliament. So they don't have to call an election, but they have to resume Parliament to swear him in as leader, from what I understand. Otherwise, Trudeau's still Prime Minister as long as the prorogation continues. But the prorogation was declared to end at a certain time. I don't think that can be extended. I feel like what they talked about is he didn't rule out using emergency powers after becoming interim Prime Minister and also postponing the election. Possibly, he didn't say up to a year past October, However, applying the Emergencies Act could push the possibility potentially till next October, not this October, if in the worst case scenario situations, which I don't think he'll do, because I feel like at that point you'd have just a full-on revolt. If you just, that's like a dictatorial takeover in my opinion. If you're just gonna like, you know, never allow our democracy to take place, and then you're gonna declare emergency powers to prolong your term, which apparently is a possibility in our system. But anyway,
yeah, there's a lot of things in government that are just good faith, like you're trusting that the other people are going to do the right thing.
Crown, thank you.
Benoît de Radio-Canada. Le NPD a laissé entendre hier que si vous êtes élu à la tête
du et ça c'est le
Zelensky or Trump and the Trump administration is signaling Ukraine will lose its chance at NATO membership and its reforms.
Well, I'm very proud of the position that the Canadian government has taken to standing firm with Ukraine and absolutely reinforce that, continue to that. The pathway
I don't even know if Zelensky's going to be at the meeting.
Ukrainian membership of the European Union and ultimately of NATO is something I support.
And your plan to reach the NATO...
Yeah, Chrystia Freeland is calling for full NATO membership of Ukraine.
2% target is less aggressive and
it's probably necessary at this point, I think.
Reach the target until Donald Trump leaves office. So I'm hoping you could explain how you plan to reach that target.
Like, I don't know if it'll ever happen,
but Russia threatened nuclear weapons if that happened. Like they said that.
Well, they're you know they already have NATO countries on their border, right? Like it doesn't even make any sense.
No,
for
it's
that
like
to be
the last
reason.
one. It's like one of the last ones though. That's not. And this this whole situation.
No, they have other. There's other countries that they have
joined NATO right after. A lot of them joined NATO.
Not the ones that they've already taken. Like they've already exercised their soft power in.
Invaded Ukraine. A lot of countries joined NATO. Like 3 or 4 countries.
Sweden and Finland, I think, did.
A couple others did too. Smaller countries.
It was countries that have been not joining NATO for years too, because they didn't think it was necessary. And as soon as that happened, they were like, "Nope, we're doing it."
Spend the money to get there, and how you would deal with Trump's aggressive posture on Canada's failure to meet the target.
So, yeah, thank you for raising it. So, a couple of things. One, the way I've framed it is by 2030, which of course means as that would be the latest, 2030. If we can accelerate that, we will. But 2 things are crucial. The first is these are taxpayers' dollars. These are precious taxpayers' dollars. We need to spend them wisely and effectively. And secondly, in the following respect, currently 80% of our capital spending, or our spend in the military on equipment, machinery, other aspects, not non-personnel expenditures, goes to the United States. Okay, goes to the United States, contracts to the United States, the existing relations with the United States. We need to spend more of that money here in Canada. We need to be ready to spend that money here in Canada. If we can accelerate that spend, more of it in Canada, securing Canada, building Canadian jobs, we absolutely will do that. I'm not going to make a promise in advance without going into detail, and I don't see a great deal of detail in those other accelerated timelines. I'm not going to make a promise in advance that either runs the risk of wasting Canadian taxpayers' dollars or sending those taxpayer dollars to the country that is currently threatening us.
Yeah, Luca, I saw that interview. It might be a tomorrow thing because I'll be streaming tomorrow. And I might just look into it tomorrow because I got to make sure we can play it. It's not on YouTube, but I did find it on another site. I just got to make sure we can play it on stream. If we can, then yeah, I'll for sure do it. But it's 50 minutes. So I think it's way too long for us to break it down with the time we have left today. But we will definitely look into it tomorrow.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you're announcing here? Mr. wanting to see
yeah.
Exactly.
So.
And I will just also note this was opposed by people in the area when it was being proposed.
Yeah, well, there's a series of issues there, Monica. One is in terms of how we build in our communities and issues around densification and social acceptance of that, and of course. Those issues are first and foremost responsibilities of local governments and representatives, stakeholder groups, community groups, and coming together. I think there's a broader recognition within the country of the value of densification appropriately done, and the various federal programs that is supporting that. So I'll address that aspect of it. But
it's funny, Fiona, you mentioned that. We're actually both currently reading his book right now.
Of course, the decisions in the end are taken by the communities, as they should.
I love when people act like reading a book is some like profound out of the box idea. It's just
It's
like
because a lot
something
of people
everybody used to do.
will cite books and not actually read them. That's the real thing. Most people don't even read full articles, I've found. People just read headlines.
In terms of what we're highlighting
tweets.
here, but then what does it mean? We're highlighting the value of this type of construction innovation, more modular housing, as I said at the outset, but I really want to reinforce. We're talking about 25 to 50% acceleration in the speed with which the homes can be built. We're talking about reducing waste by up to 50%. There's a huge amount of waste in construction. And that's not unique to Canada, but it's an issue in Canada. It's one we should address. We're talking about...
Yeah, that has to do with red tape, buddy. That has to do with, because like, they'll order like $1,000 of drywall, something goes wrong with the permits, and then all of a sudden now that drywall is sitting there for 2 years, goes moldy, and then throwing it out. Like, that happened a lot. Like, I see it in BC, like just stuff like that happening all the time. It's just like so stupid.
Reducing costs by 25%. We have a huge problem with affordability. If we can strip out 25% of the cost of homes, it's going to make it easier for young Canadian families to get those homes, more people into proper housing, decent housing. So all of those benefits are there. Now, what is the role of the federal government in that?
Well, arguably, Luca, we're not wasting time because now we could read the whole book ourselves. And then when people throw quotes at us, we can be like, well, was that quote really in the book? Which apparently is a misconception. I think just a product of AI these days, you're going to end up with a lot of people being paraphrasing quotes and stuff like that. And like, I've done it myself multiple times. And then I'm like, oh, I have to go back. Like, oh crap, I had it wrong. I thought this source was a little bit more honest. Maybe I should just read the book myself. Happened a few times. And that's where why I choose to read the books myself now. And, you know, years later, because I'm like, I don't like taking other people's opinions. I'd rather figure out my own. And that's why, if you notice, a lot of the mainstream media stuff we cover is mainly just interviews and people talking. Like, we don't really cover the opinion pieces very much, or try to stay away from them. Like those
Sometimes
panels.
I don't mind hearing people's opinion on stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll watch the occasional.
I like to go
power
in and see where they're getting the information, because it's crazy. I think it's more than ever right now. You have people who are paraphrasing things. They're quoting tweets. They're quoting, like, it's weird. You can find, like I said, that one where the top result says Mark Carney's worth $96 billion, but then you look through and it's actually somebody else in the article is quoted as being $96
Back
billion,
to the
and it
chat
gets quoted
here.
to him.
So this is funny because Great Dominion is saying rocks are far more interesting than Mark Carney. I agree. Did you know that there's 3 types of rocks actually? There's mesomorphic, igneous, and you're gonna go talk about rocks, guys. I used to want to be a paleontologist. I used to actually read books on
We
geology.
should switch to we're gonna become a paleontology
talk about Earth
podcast.
sciences the whole time.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Just completely switch it up.
Role partly as a partner, and it can do several things. Some of these are in train, some of them my government would reinforce. One is around building codes. So when you come up with new innovations, you have to make sure that
it's sedimentary. Okay, so it's igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. You know, already rocks are more interesting than Mark Carney.
That they meet certain code
Found this really cool
standards,
evolution
that, for example,
channel the other
federal
day.
financing,
Just talking
for
about
something called
convergence.
CMHC, which you would know, that financing is available, and so accelerating the speed with which we set, as the federal government, the range of codes, the range of structures that we will finance and support through various federal programs. That's a huge role for the federal government.
Yeah, see, quartz is technically a mineral. It's a hard crystalline mineral made of silica.
Other point I'd make, and I just came from the
Have you ever seen that stuff like convergent theory, where there's like multiple different species that have almost the identical body structures for different environments?
Like the whole thing of the phylogenetic trees, right? And the way that they all kind of like network towards, they bottleneck.
Well, they're talking about
back to each
the
other.
crocodile and how there's been like a bunch of different animals that have like very, very similar structures that built, because it's like the perfect hunting in the water.
Luca's asking if I'm a dinosaur fan. Give me a second.
Structures lab, volumetric structures.
Luca, do you believe in
some of that
dinosaurs?
is
I know there's some
supported through
people
federal
that
research
don't believe in dinosaurs
so
anymore.
providing that federal research funding, and then taking the next stage in terms of commercialization and tax credits and others that promote that commercialization, that provide the incentives, and also provide support for those who are building. And if I just wrap all of this together,
Justus
set
was a
for me
dinosaur
as,
guy when we were
for
kids
the
too, like
country.
little kids.
This
He was a
is
huge
the time
dinosaur.
to
He used to
build.
want to
It's
watch Jurassic
directly
Park and then
relevant
get
to the
scared and hide behind the
to
couch.
the,
You know what? Shut up, okay?
tariff
The
response
Velociraptors
to
were
the United
terrifying
States.
as a child.
We don't
They were
need
pretty
the United
scary, yeah.
States permission
Jurassic Park
to build
3 was
more
the
housing.
scariest one.
Dude, Jurassic Park 3 was basically a horror flick when I was a kid, okay?
Yeah, it was,
But I was
yeah.
saying, like, dude, I read this book cover to cover with notes, took notes, everything. I used to be find weird, arbitrary goals, and I just achieve them. I don't know why. So it was be like, oh, I'm going to read all these books. Oh, I'm going to read this 500-page textbook called Gaining Ground about early tetrapods evolving from going from swamp pools to land animals and stuff like that. And I used to find it is really interesting. But what I found reading a lot of that stuff is that a lot of it's just guesswork, and paleontologists' entire job is basically educated guessing. It's one of those things where it's like, so I think one of the guys.
Well, it's a lot of theory and testing the theories,
well, it's
right?
Depressing,
Like,
right? It's
seeing
depressing
to see
to
if
me
they.
because like the way I forget the exact quote, but he was saying being a paleontologist is like trying to piece together the crime scene, but you're never going to actually achieve a verdict or find out who's guilty. Like it's basically you're just forever investigating a crime scene, and that's what history is. Arguably the same thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of like
anthropology, stuff like that. Yeah.
I can't remember who was. It might have been my kid telling me that.
Yeah, I don't know if
fossils aren't all bones; they're just imprints and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah.
Not to discredit your kid at all, Luca, but there is an insane amount of dinosaurs. They're actually broken down to 3 main groups, which is the like ornithopods, sauropods, and theropods, each indicated by their own certain traits. You know, I'm just going to a dinosaur lecture.
We should switch to that. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just go back to this. Well, honestly, I feel like our engagement's going up as I'm talking about dinosaurs and getting away from Mark Carney. So I guess it's people like dinosaurs more than Mark Carney. But yeah, no, it's actually pretty crazy because there's like something like 2,000 different dinosaur species. I forget what it is. And people actually forget that a lot of the early reptiles are not dinosaurs. So you see like Dimetrodon and other early reptiles that actually lived through the early Triassic periods that were, you know, just going on. I'm kidding. If you ever come to Alberta, you'll have to go to I actually used to have an idea. I wanted to go there. BC sucks for fossils because it's all early vertebrates, which is just boring. That's like being a theoretical physicist, in my opinion. You're essentially just like, oh, I'm going to study something no one can see. And, you know, it's just like, it's basically not no one can see, but, you know, it's like something that's just like so far reaching. You're like studying basically bugs from 450 million years ago compared to like if you go like back to like dinosaurs, it's like from the Jurassic, Triassic, and Cretaceous periods, which go from like 60 to 220 million years ago by their timelines.
We need support from the federal government, both in terms of the tax incentives, support.
Yeah, actually, it makes a lot of sense. Theropods were so actually the way this works down. I'm going to break this down actually because I feel like people are kind of bored of Mark Carney, and we got the gist of what I was going for here. So basically with birds, it's actually the theropods that evolved into birds. So if you it actually does make sense if you look at the theropods and their bone structure from the fossils we have found. Think about those raptors that were found containing feathers that were pulled out of a swamp in Xinjiang in China. It was literally like, it was American scientists unearthed these. They were literally had feathers on them because they were like fossilized in tar. So they had feathers still, like physical feathers on them. So that's when they were able to verify that, oh, theropods had feathers. That's why now if you look at T-Rexes and all these velociraptors and everything, they all have feathers now because they were able to verify that, oh, well, theropods must have had feathers for sure. That's when we have evidence of 100%. If you look at the microraptors that lived in the Triassic period, when the time with the giant coniferous trees that existed on Earth at the time, which we apparently do have fossils of as well. We have leaves, branches. We don't have a whole tree though, so take that with a grain of salt. These things were basically birds, these raptors that lived that long ago that were gliding tree to tree. They turned into or evolved into most of the raptors and the microraptors we know of, T-Rex, every other theropod there is that we knew of at the time. It was the small theropods that survived the last the meteor that wiped them out, or the last great extinction that wiped them out. So it's just yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing, right? Is that it's really, it makes sense, that transition. To me, what doesn't make sense in evolution, the most weirdest thing that does not make sense, I do not have dinosaur PJs anymore. I did when I was a kid, though. That doesn't make sense is us. Humans don't make sense to me. Humans, hominids, make zero sense in evolution because we just don't make sense. We're so like everything else just seems like a repetitive pattern, and then there's us. We're like something so new out of nowhere in such a short
there used to be a bunch
time,
of us
right?
different, like because of
Yeah,
there was like a
but
bunch of
that's
different
arguable
hominids,
as well,
right?
because like some of those species of other humans they found, like I think it was Homo jovenus specifically, they only had a tooth. So you're telling me off one tooth, you've constructed an
I've heard
entire
this one. This is the
species?
creationist talking point. They always talk about that one tooth one.
No,
I don't even
it's-
think that's in the
that-
fossil record.
I
They
don't even
use
know
that
that argument.
anymore.
That's just my own deduction from what I knew about it when I read that article of them discovering it from the book *Sapiens* by Noah Yuval Harari, which I read, and I read *Homo Deus* and his third book he did. And honestly, the guy's kind of a psycho and pro-communism. Don't get me wrong. However, he talked a lot about transhumanism and post-human, and he justifies racism being because there's so many different species of hominids at a point on Earth that were all fighting and warring each other, or fighting against each
You're
other.
talking about Nebraska, man, the human ape link that turned out to be a pig.
No. Homo jovenus was one of the, I think it was from New Zealand. So, yeah, I don't even know where this is coming from, Luca. It's just trigger, and then it's like, boom, it's coming back. Yeah, I don't know. That's the thing, right? Is like I think we're made by aliens, bro. Like I think aliens.
Homo
made us.
Julianus?
Like,
Is that the one you're talking about?
Homo
Julianus.
Jovenus.
Jovinus.
Jovinus. Jovinus. I believe that's what it was. I think it was from New Zealand. It was yeah.
I can't find it. A Christian theological term. Homoousian.
No, but it was literally cited. Like,
Is it spelled different? Maybe Javanensis.
We'll,
Is that the
we'll,
one?
we'll have to retouch up on that
Java
one. I feel
man?
like I don't think it was one of the. Honestly, I feel like it was more interesting. I think this conversation is more interesting than Mark Carney. Well, to me at least.
The
Sorry
excavation
to insult any
team.
liberals in
This
the
one's
chat
a
here.
tooth, a skull cap, and a thigh bone in the banks of Solo River in East Java.
Yeah, so people can actually, a thigh bone is a pretty big deal if you can
Thigh bone,
verify
a
it's
skull
a
cap,
thigh bone,
and a tooth.
right?
Yeah.
Because there's certain bones where you can think it's like, a femur is a good example of one that, oh, this might be a femur for such and such, but it could actually be a smaller bone for a larger. This happens a lot of time in paleontology, right? Where they like mix up, because like you could have a dinosaur you have as like a registered species, but you've never seen some of their bones before, right? So then you can actually find those and mistake it for an entirely new species at first, and then that connection can be made way later, right? It's just a guessing game, a lot of it, right? And especially with like well,
it's theories that hold up too, though, because not all of it's guessing, right? You make a guess and then you see if the theory holds up over time, and as they don't hold up, you just get rid of stuff.
Well, I don't know. To me, like I've read a lot on this stuff.
The theory gets stronger.
What I get from
stronger.
it all, it's arguable of where we came from. Our story is not.
I
fully
don't
written.
know.
I
just think it's like the idea of there needing to be some kind of extra source to add in something. It's and even then who made did the aliens also have some kind of alien that ignited their thing, or do you think it's just
because
so out of
we
place?
can witness one thing we can't deny is certain animals. Like I think the biggest thing for me is the transition from the theropods to birds. It's very. I used to not make any sense of it, and then once I actually read all the reading I did, that was the one connection that made the most sense to me.
Grew up
and then if you look at like certain animals, like take like tigers for example, they haven't changed that much in like 50 million years according to these records. So like to me, like, there's not many gaps until you get to humans. In great apes.
Well, and the big thing too is whenever there's
it's almost like two pieces, like hominids and great apes are two pieces that look alike, but they don't quite fit together. And that's what I mean. Right?
If the dinosaurs hadn't been wiped out, there wouldn't have been all these extra places for people to go after these great events. There's always these like wild species that develop, right?
You asked me a question I didn't get to answer. I was just saying what you're saying about where would the other aliens come from. Well, it's like they would come from the same process of evolution, I think, over a longer period of time, right? Who's to say that? I'm not saying we're unique as the only intelligent life. I just think that it's a strong possibility there's other intelligent life out there that occurred naturally, found our planet, realized its potential, and somehow cultured us into existence. And we refer
I just feel like it's unnecessary.
I just think it's cool story.
It would be cool, but I don't see it as like a necessary part of the story.
There's a missing link is all I'm saying. Is that there's a missing
Which
link.
part of it is missing, do you think?
Like I said, the connection of hominids to the rest of everything else. It doesn't make sense.
Hominids to great apes and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, the great apes to hominids, we don't quite make sense. Like you need to look at it all. You can go back to Australopithecus and all the early chimpanzee human shared ancestors, but there's some branches off when you go about 700,000 years back. It starts to not make sense.
How many? Okay, so which specifically, it's like the Australopithecus. Okay, I'll look into this one. Because yeah, I don't know. Every time I look into this stuff, I'm always like, I don't know. Like I'm so slow to believe anything now because I grew up kind of believing a lot of things that I heard, and then as I got older, I looked into things and I was like, oh, okay, like
so
none of this was
my knowledge
based on
could be
anything.
outdated, right? Because my obsession was like almost 10 years ago now, and it's been like all that data is like information. These books are all like 5 or 6 years old. So a lot of my information could have changed. Maybe there's some new profound discoveries no one gives a crap about, not even me, because now into politics. But it's you know, I just don't see it. And to me, I think that the idea
You don't see it, like you think it's impossible.
Years, I think the idea that we've been around for 10,000 years is impossible and silly.
Who said 10,000 years though? I don't think that's the idea.
That's
Is
actually a creationist thing. It's very 10,000 years, and it was actually originally 6,000 years. Then it was pushed back to 10,000 years after the discovery of certain civilizations that were proved to be existing and proved to exist at a certain time, like Mesopotamia.
The current
and
theory is that
a couple other ones.
Modern humans developed 350 to 260,000 years ago in the East and South Africa, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, but we're just about to wrap up anyways, guys, so no worries. We're pretty much
super off topic.
This was the
here.
last video I had anyways, was the Mark Carney thing, and we got what we needed from it. I didn't delete any of your posts, 2 cents. You might have we have a bot moderating now, so the bot might have, the RoboCop might have dinged you. Yeah, it flagged Autumn for saying moron, so I gotta change that. It flagged Autumn's post for saying moron, so don't feel personally attacked there, 2 cents, by it. I didn't delete anything personally. It was probably
I haven't even been looking at the chat.
We have to have a bot moderating because it just gets too freaking much sometimes with it all. So not a bot, but like, you know, it's the auto
just to
AI
filter some of it. It's
right?
usually pretty good. It like whenever I'm looking at the chat, it'll ask me, it'll request, and I approve like a lot of them.
Yeah, sometimes it flags ones. I'm like, why are you flagging that? But then sometimes it flags one, like, oh, I'm glad you flagged that one. That's pretty bad. Because just because it comes up on the screen, like we could YouTube. If someone wanted to make a complaint, I think we could be, you know, put in trouble in some way for something else. You know, we're platforming people apparently by letting them speak. But yeah. We'll see what happens with all this. My whole thing with, you know, back to politics, away from the evolution stuff talk. Yeah, it is Luca's fault, guys, by the way.
It's always Luca's fault.
Honestly,
you're definitely the one that derails me the most in the chat. I'll be like,
I feel like I've been waiting
triggered by
a few
Luca.
years for someone to ask me about dinosaurs, though. You know, then I just starts coming back. But yeah, anyways, now I'm going to apply all those resources and power to politics and try and see what I can come up with over the next few years of exposure.
We'll find out that Mark Carney doesn't make sense. Where did he come from?
Yeah, I don't think I don't even think most people, like, sometimes it doesn't flag, like someone could put 16 cuss words in a message and it won't flag it. Then someone calls someone a moron and it flags it. So
yeah, there is a little bit of inconsistency there. I've seen that.
Yeah, it's a little bit ridiculous. So if it's not working very well, we'll probably end up getting something else. But anyways, that's the point. We do unfortunately need some moderation, just because, not because you regulars are in here always being pretty respectful, just because we have like, oh, like this guy
yeah,
on
it's
Twitch,
for random people that come into the chat and start.
Yeah, because I don't have it set up on Twitch and we're getting ads on there. So see, this is why, guys. This is why. Recurring affront. That's definitely a bot name. Like, what? Yeah, jeez. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, we're pretty much out of time for today. It being Valentine's Day, got some stuff I got to get done and make sure I am an extra good husband today. So there's some things I got to get done around the house and everything. And so I'm going to be doing that. We might be when we put out some videos later, I'll probably put out a video of, just the headline for today, just with the current upcoming election in March. Apparently, according to people, they're putting their money where their mouth they're putting their money where their mouth isn't yet. They're putting their, it's a weird situation. So we'll see what happens. I definitely think this is for real. We will be seeing an election in March, just given the state of the polls. It just makes a lot of sense that they'd want to call an election right away as well and capitalize on this whole crisis, because in the words of Hillary Clinton, can't let a good crisis go to waste. So anyways, thanks guys. Have a great day. And
have a good one. See ya.
Stay grounded.